think I'm afraid of your filthy badge, Dean? In a Sacramento residential block at night, Malcolm Shaw, head of internal affairs, is pulled over by a white cop and interrogated like a criminal. With just one flash of the gold badge, he topples the entire Rourke family that's been rooted in the shadows. When justice is live-streamed in the street, who still dares to believe a badge is a shield forever? What state are you in, where the police are watched by whom? Malcolm Shaw left the IA office close to 11 at night, his shoulders still dusted with bits of paperwork, his collar slightly rumpled from a long meeting. Tonight, he'd just closed a disciplinary case that had dragged on for 3 months. A rookie detective caught pocketing cash envelopes from a nightclub gang. Tired, but in his head flickered a faint relief, the feeling of a man scrubbing out the darkest corners of a system that could never truly be clean. Sacramento's streets at night still had the occasional car, mostly taxis or late-shift workers. The old blocks he glided through had windows glowing warm yellow, shadows of porch swings and petunia pots cast on the walls, a surface calm, just enough to make people forget they were living in a city whose roads hid countless buried question marks about honor, power, and money. Malcolm couldn't be bothered to play music, but switched on the radio anyway, letting voices blend with the hiss of wind against his window. His stomach twisted with a dull hunger. In his mind, he pictured the cold sandwich he'd left in the fridge. Just a few more blocks and he'd be back at his temporary apartment, eat, shower, then collapse before sunrise. But the rearview mirror caught a sudden flash of red and blue, a strobe of light flaring and locking onto his bumper like iron claws. Malcolm squinted, eased off the gas, and pulled over. He didn't sigh, he just let out a quiet breath, a reflex born of years watching badge holders twist the word law however they pleased. Behind him, Patrol Officer Dean Rourke cracked his knuckles, stepping out of his cruiser at a slow, deliberate pace. He'd had his eye on this black sedan since it turned onto the block. What did he see? A black guy behind the wheel of a new car, dressed sharp, crawling through an empty street, and in Dean's mind, an old script played out. Sloppy paperwork, a few threats, rummage through the trunk, maybe score something. If nothing turned up, no big deal. One night of flexing cheap power was still enough to fuel the lesson his father had drilled in. Want to break these colored folks? Make 'em kneel before they even lift their heads. Malcolm watched through the mirror, saw Dean's shadow closing in, the man's hand resting on his belt, the same intimidation pose Malcolm had written up in dozens of disciplinary files over the past year. He wasn't afraid, he was just tired, knowing that tonight the wheels of justice weren't done rolling yet. Dean Rourke switched on his flashlight, its white beam slicing straight through Malcolm's rear view, trying to strip every layer inside. He came closer, hand still planted on his belt, an unspoken threat made routine. Malcolm rolled down the window, voice steady, utterly unfazed. "Is there a problem, officer?" Dean squinted, scanning Malcolm from head to toe. Crisp suit, neat tie, spotless car, then let out a mocking snort. "Step out of the car. I'm checking your papers." Malcolm pulled out his wallet, held up the registration, but Dean slapped his hand aside, signaling him to pop the trunk instead. From a nearby house window, a neighbor quietly peered out, phone raised, ready to record. Dean didn't care, not a flicker of hesitation. A chill stabbed down Malcolm's spine. Tonight, this was far from routine. Dean's voice dropped to a growl, thick with threat. "You think that suit and this car make you clean? Get out. Hands on the hood. Now." Malcolm stood still, both hands pressed on the cold hood, night mist soaking slowly through his shirt sleeves. Behind him, Dean's annoyed rummaging sounded loud, the document pouch yanked open, official papers scattered onto the sidewalk like worthless scraps. Dean lowered his voice but fired off questions in rapid bursts. "Whose car is this? What do you do for a living? Where'd you get the money for this car?" Malcolm didn't turn around. He stared into the rearview mirror, catching the blurry image of Dean hunched over the trunk like a starving animal digging for stale bread. His reply was short, unwavering. "The car is registered to me. My job pays enough to buy it. You can call headquarters to verify." Dean snorted, flung the file onto the roadside grass. Papers fluttered, landing limp in the damp night air. Light from the neighbor's window swept over, a phone lens zooming in, capturing every second of the burly cop pinning a well-dressed black man to the hood. Dean caught the sight, a flicker of irritation flashing in his eyes, before he masked it with a sly smirk. Malcolm's glance flicked to the recording phone, fully aware that each second was living proof. He wet his lips, kept his voice level, but his words stabbed right through Dean's fragile ego. "You can call the department to confirm. No need to dig through my stuff like trash." Dean squeezed Malcolm's shoulder, pressed his face close to the back of Malcolm's neck, breath reeking of stale coffee and cigarettes. His voice dragged out, tight as a fraying cord. "You telling me how to do my job? You people get spoiled. Think you can talk big. Huh?" His other hand clamped the back of Malcolm's neck, sliding down the collar as if searching for something hidden. For a few seconds, Malcolm felt the brute force of the grip, but his face stayed unchanged, the deep calm of someone who'd dissected files far dirtier than this 100 times over. The Sacramento night stayed dangerously quiet, and Dean's abuse of power, Malcolm knew, had only begun to crack its thin shell. Dean yanked out a citation pad from his pocket, pen wedged between his fingers, voice flat but barbed, obstructing an officer, non-compliance, interference with a lawful search. He scribbled furiously, muttering threats like nails hammered into a coffin lid. Malcolm didn't move, fingers tightening on the hood's edge, eyes flicking to the opposite window. The phone still aimed straight, its red recording light locked on every instant. Dean rifled through Malcolm's wallet, his coarse fingers flipping business cards, bank cards, bits of paperwork. Beneath the leather, the silver IA badge glimmered faintly, but Dean didn't notice. His head buzzed hot, sweat beading at his temples. A creeping realization stirred. This black man didn't beg, didn't plead, didn't squirm like the others he'd cuffed and clubbed. Malcolm's tone cut in, low but edged like a hidden blade. "You sure you know what you're doing, Officer Rourke?" The way he hit officer stabbed straight through the flimsy armor of power Dean clung to. Dean's hand froze, then his teeth ground tight. His left hand swung out, slapping Malcolm's cheek with a dry crack. Small, but the recording phone caught it clean. A murmur rippled down the block. Windows clicked open. More cameras appeared, tiny red lights blinking in the dark. Malcolm lifted his face again, a red mark swelling on his cheek, but his eyes still steady, unmoved. He locked his gaze on Dean, voice pressed deep in his throat, like a bullet not yet chambered but everyone knew would fire. "All right, you just cut off your own way out, Dean Rourke." In that split second, Dean finally saw what he hadn't grasped before. Tonight's hunt wasn't him hunting. He'd just turned himself into prey in front of nameless lenses, eager to strip his mask bare. From the second-floor window of the house across the street, a small light flicked on along with a live stream signal. The image of Malcolm with his hands on the cold hood, his face stone still, and Dean Rourke rummaging through the trunk streamed out with zero delay. It took only a few minutes for 2 or 3 more neighboring apartments to light up, curtains cracking open, half-hidden faces behind them, phones trembling slightly, but eyes glued to the front yard and the sleek black sedan. Dean began to hear the whispers drifting on the night breeze, the clicks of phones snapping shots, message notifications pinging, someone even snickering as they watched him yank Malcolm's document pouch and toss it onto the grass. Heat crept up Dean's neck. He turned slightly to the right and caught a beam of LED light from another phone, zoomed in tight on his badge. "Stay still. I didn't say you could lift your head." Dean's voice cracked like an execution order. He barked, but even he heard the tremor caught in his throat. Malcolm said nothing. His eyes flickered, sweeping the window panes above, counting how many cameras were tightening around Dean like an invisible noose. Dean sucked in a breath, plunged his hand deep into the trunk. He yanked the work file out hard, papers spilling over the asphalt, still warm from the day's heat. A thick envelope slipped out, its flap ripped by Dean's clawing nails. The patrol car's lights, porch lamps, and live stream glare all merged to spotlight every bead of sweat now soaking Dean's neck. A few steps away, a young man in a black hoodie leaned against an old tamarind tree, phone held chest high, whispering to his friend beside him, loud enough for the live stream mic to catch. This cop's toast. Over 300 people are watching live. He's got nowhere to hide. Malcolm saw the small crowd gathering by the sidewalk. He felt the night air blowing warmth down Dean's back instead of the chill it had carried moments before. A dry smile flicked at the corner of Malcolm's lips. He didn't need to argue, didn't need to twist the law, didn't need to say a word. Tonight, the cameras would speak for him. Every frame would slice away the mask of authority Dean had worn for so long. Dean began to lose his rhythm. He ripped open the glove box, dragged out the insurance papers, and flung them to the ground at Malcolm's feet. Finding nothing, he moved to the sunglasses compartment, rapped on the first aid kit as if he could drag out the evidence he'd invented in his head. His motions were clumsy, frantic. If any other IA officer were watching, they'd mark a red flag in his service file right then and there. Dean's breathing turned ragged, his shoulders pumping as he inhaled the scent of car plastic mixed with the panic seeping through his uniform. The fabric scraped against the sedan's edge, rustling awkwardly in the silent night. From the sidewalk, neighbors stopped whispering and spoke loud enough for all to hear. "This guy's abusing his power. Keep filming. Post it straight online." A middle-aged woman with graying hair stepped onto her porch, clutching a large tablet, zooming in on Dean's face. The red and blue patrol lights bounced off his now pale skin, sweat trickling down his temple and dripping onto his dark collar. Dean spotted the massive lens recording him from barely 3 steps away. His heart pounded out of control, but his hands still fumbled at the first aid kit, nails scraping the plastic with a shrill squeal. Malcolm stood there, silent as a statue, not even the wind ruffling the hem of his suit jacket. He knew the less he spoke, the deeper Dean sank. Every pointless search, every empty threat, all turning this night's cop into a public fool. And Dean himself was snapping the handcuffs he once used to shackle others. "I know you're hiding something. You're not getting away with this," Dean snarled, hand clawing wildly at the empty boxes. His voice cracked. Sweat poured down his neck like a leaking gutter. A ripple of laughter crept along the sidewalk. Phones lifted higher. LED lights burned brighter. Under the flickering patrol lights, Dean Rourke knew, for the first time in his patrol life, there was nowhere left to run. No cover to cling to, only the badge slipping off his chest, more worthless than any scrap of paper he'd just rummaged through. Malcolm stood still, quietly leaning against the edge of the car, his black eyes sharp as blades, scrutinizing every panicked movement of Dean. The fat officer, his uniform stretching over his beer belly, rummaged through Malcolm's trunk like a thief tearing apart an altar cabinet. Dean muttered curses under his breath as he flipped through documents and tossed gloves everywhere, sweat beading at his temples. "You think you're tough, huh? If I find anything, you'll rot in jail," he growled, but kept his voice down, afraid the people across the street might hear. Malcolm said nothing, just shifted his gaze to the crowd beginning to gather. The clicks of phone cameras and a few live stream notifications broke the air. The more Dean searched, the more flustered he became. He hissed, "Bastard, where did you hide the evidence?" His hands trembled slightly as he grabbed the vehicle registration and threw it onto the street, panting like he'd just run a marathon. Malcolm exhaled softly, his hand slipping slowly into the inner pocket of his suit. The cold glint in his eyes froze the air around them. A harsh ray of sunlight hit Malcolm's shoulder just as he pulled out a small, square, metallic object gleaming under the midday sun. He stepped forward, then another step, now only an arm's length away from Dean. Dean looked up, his tightly pressed lips loosening instantly, eyes wide as if seeing a ghost. The golden badge engraved with "Internal Affairs" shone inches from his face. Malcolm didn't say a word. He lifted the badge to Dean's eye level, making sure everyone around could see. The murmurs erupted like a swarm of bees. A lottery ticket vendor tugged her grandchild closer. "Look, he's going all in with Internal Affairs." A group of students shifted angles, phones recording non-stop. The sugarcane juice seller across the street shouted, "He's done for! Touching IA! Dead man walking!" Dean stepped back, his face turning from flushed red to deathly pale. He glanced around, spotting a few uniformed officers near the patrol car, all looking at him with awkward eyes. Dean forced a crooked smile, lunging to grab the badge, but Malcolm leaned away slightly, his face still ice-cold. "You're abusing your power to detain without cause. This is an investigation badge. I've recorded everything." Malcolm's voice wasn't loud, but each word hit like nails into wood. Dean spun around, barking at his two subordinates. "What the hell are you waiting for? Cuff him!" The two young cops exchanged looks, then looked at Malcolm, then at the glaring gold badge under the sun. One reached for his radio to call dispatch, but froze halfway. Both stood stiff as statues. Malcolm remained calm. He slipped the badge back into his suit pocket, took out his phone, hit the record button, and pointed at Dean. "I demand you put your hands behind your back. This is an internal detainment order. Everything is being recorded as evidence for the public." Dean's eyes bulged like he wanted to punch Malcolm right there, but only his fingertips twitched. He sucked in a long breath, neck veins popping, then glanced at the gleeful crowd pointing their phones at him from every angle. An elderly lady, toothless but with a voice like a public loudspeaker, cursed him out. "You're finished, boy." A local bully? "Now there's a big shot. Better know your place." Laughter roared, drowning out passing car horns. A student kneeled by the sidewalk. Camera zoomed right in Dean's face, commentating like a war correspondent. "Look, everyone, Boss Dean just got flipped. Abusing power, now stuck with the Internal Affairs chief. He's frozen like a statue. Ha ha." Dean turned, trying to draw his gun, but his hand shook like a cramped muscle. Just as he touched the grip, another officer stepped up, gently pushing his hand down. "Boss, calm down. It's over. Let the higher-ups handle it." Dean's twisted face sweated so much it soaked his eyebrows. He looked at Malcolm as if begging, but Malcolm's eyes showed zero pity. The cheers grew louder. Everyone wanted to capture the moment when the once fearsome Dean was now a beaten dog. Online, the live stream spread like wildfire. One user commented, "Corrupt cop exposed on the street, arrested on the spot." Malcolm stood there, firm as a landmark in the noisy chaos. He lowered his voice, only for Dean's ears. "You picked the wrong man, Dean." Dean seemed drained of life. He collapsed back against the patrol car, gasping. Everything he'd used to intimidate others, power, stars, badge, gun, stripped away by a single, shining gold shield. Bitter, salty sweat dripped to his lips, mixing with an humiliation no soap could wash clean. Malcolm made a short call. "Send Internal Affairs Unit. Immediate on-site arrest. Full visual evidence available." He hung up, straightened his collar, then turned to the crowd. His eyes swept over dozens of raised phones, finally resting on Dean's crumbling face. Amid the bustling street, Malcolm stood unmoved, a living warning. This gold badge would scrape every nest of filth hidden in a police uniform, and Dean was only the first cat. With a slight hand gesture, a young officer, baby-faced and clearly nervous, tiptoed towards Dean. The boy was trembling, but Malcolm's stare held him steady. "Disarm him and take his badge," Malcolm said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. The young officer swallowed hard, nodded, then slipped his hand to unholster Dean's gun. Dean tried to bat him away, but before he could, Malcolm blocked him with a firm arm. "Stay still, Dean. It's all on record." Dean let out a guttural snarl like a beast trapped by the neck. He forced a mocking smile, but his twitching face turned it into a pitiful grimace. His gun and badge were stripped away, leaving only a sweat-soaked uniform and the dangling stars now worthless like cheap trinkets. Malcolm spoke low, each word nailing shut a coffin. "Dean Thomas, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court. You have the right to an attorney." The crowd held their breath as the Miranda rights rang out, then burst into applause and whoops. A scrawny student, still holding a bubble tea, squeezed up next to Malcolm, phone in hand. "Sir, I got the full clip from the start. Him cussing you out, threatening, swearing at the public, too. I'll send it now." Malcolm nodded. accepted the file, eyes never leaving Dean. Behind him, more citizens crowded forward, fighting to tell stories of Dean's past abuses, his intimidation, his bullying of street vendors. Their words poured out like a broken dam, washing away every last shred of his rotten authority. Farther back, Dean's gang of cops, once brazen under his shadow, now slipped away, heads down. An older cop whispered to his buddy, "I'm heading back to the station, gonna fake a stomach ache. Stick around here and you're done for too." The patrol car door opened and slammed shut. Another patrol car pulled up, its door popping open as a rugged superior officer stepped out. He looked at Malcolm handling Dean like a petty criminal, shook his head slightly, hands in his pockets, eyes weary. No one dared intervene anymore. As the stink of journalists' ink hit the air, the scene flared up again. A flock of reporters stormed in, microphones pointed at Malcolm like at a celebrity caught in a fresh scandal. A young female reporter pressed in. "Sir, do you have a statement about this arrest? Is this the start of a bigger investigation?" Malcolm glanced at the camera lens, voice hard as steel. "We're cleaning up this dump. Starting with him, not a word wasted. Not an empty promise given." Dean was pushed toward the patrol car. He had no strength left to yell or threaten. His eyes were bloodshot with festering hatred, but his hands were cuffed tight behind his back. The click of the handcuffs sounded like a death knell for the stars on his shoulder. The crowd parted. Cameras zoomed in, recording every step Dean dragged himself forward, head bowed under the scorching sun. A middle-aged man clapped loudly. "Serves him right. Now the leeches will think twice." Kids chased behind, cheering and jumping like they'd just seen the best show in town. Malcolm stood still, watching Dean's figure shoved into the back seat of the patrol car. The dry click of the door closing sealed off the power Dean once flaunted so brazenly. A few elders stepped up, patting Malcolm on the shoulder, calling him a hero. He only nodded lightly, lips unsmiling. In his head there was no easy joy, only a list of dirty names yet to be dragged out. He reached into his inner pocket, carefully slipped the gold badge back in, pressing it against his chest, the only shield he trusted in this city. Malcolm watched the patrol car drive off, his gaze lingering on a few cameras still trailing him, live streams rolling non-stop. He muttered silently to himself, "Plenty more like you. I'll drag them all into the light so these people see every true face." The crowd slowly dispersed, but the buzz lingered. Fresh clips flooded online groups. The chatter, the sweat, the stifling heat, all captured the moment a man once sitting atop power was dragged through the mud in front of the people he once treated like trash. Once Dean's vehicle disappeared from sight, Malcolm turned away, striding down the street lined with still recording phones. No one dared block his path, stepping aside as if clearing the way for the storm brewing inside the gold badge in his pocket. And somewhere, the lenses stayed locked on him, reminding every filthy snake left the hunt had only just begun. The iron door of the Internal Affairs IA interrogation room shut behind Malcolm with a heavy metallic clang, like the sound of a prison lock sealing away festering truths that no one had dared to open for years. The old yellow lamp hanging from the ceiling flickered once, casting its glow on a dark wooden table with chipped corners. Malcolm slumped down into a rickety swivel chair, his breath mingling with the scent of old paper, stale coffee, and the fine dust covering files untouched for years. He reached out, pulled the thick stack of files closer, and ran his fingers gently along the spine, clearing a path for the storm he was about to unleash. On the file cover, Dean Rourke. The faded ink and creased corner revealed it had been opened once, then quickly shut and buried away. Malcolm flipped the first page, his eyes sharp as blades cutting into each trembling line of text on the old paper. Disciplinary reports, complaints, petitions, layers of documents stacked like bricks to wall off the truth. The first case, assaulting a suspect in the holding cell. Victim suffered 2 broken ribs. Verdict, handled internally. The second case, bribed to ignore drug evidence. The attached report almost entirely redacted, stamped resolved. Each page he turned made the musty stench thicker, as if every sheet was a festering sore of the rotten system Dean had been feeding off for so long. He methodically sorted the papers into piles, one for violent conduct, one for bribery, one for out-of-court settlements. Once done, Malcolm leaned back, his fingers tapping slowly on the table. Then he noticed a thinner folder, its yellowed paper stained with old coffee marks. He pulled it out and flipped it open. On the first page, a neat, rounded signature, Franklin Rourke, Sr., a name that reeked of power mixed with filth just by reading it. The letter inside was something Malcolm hadn't expected. Elegant letterhead, an opening line straight to the point, to the chief inspector. The content was only a few lines, but enough to rip open the whole power web. I, Franklin Rourke Sr., guarantee personal oversight of my son Dean Rourke's behavior. Any troubles will be handled quietly by the family. Trust us. At the bottom, a bold signature. The pen pressed so hard the ink left an imprint, like a slap in the face to anyone naive enough to believe in justice in this rotting city. Malcolm laid the letter on the table, closed his eyes for a few seconds to suppress the anger boiling in his chest. He clenched the folder so tight the knuckles of his hand turned white. Not just Dean, a whole nest of snakes, he muttered, his voice low like a curse. In his mind flashed the image of Franklin Rourke Sr., a powerful politician, flashing pearly whites for the cameras, shaking hands with businessmen, posing with church leaders for charity, all while nurturing thugs like Dean to terrorize the poor and stuff his own pockets. A ringing phone cut through his thoughts. Malcolm grabbed it. His colleague's rushed voice on the line. "Boss, the press is tearing Dean apart. They want IA to release the files. What now? Lock the conference room or back up everything first?" Malcolm didn't answer immediately. He looked at the scattered documents. The bright red, handled internally stamps, now looking more like dried blood than dead ink. He nodded slightly, as if commanding himself. "Lock the safe. Print a full copy. If I disappear, release everything. Let this city see the truth." He put the phone down, stretched his shoulders, his eyes flashing cold in the musty office air. Dean was just surface trash. The real beast was still sitting in an air-conditioned room, sipping fine wine and smiling for clueless cameras. Malcolm brushed his fingers along the folder again, like stroking the beast's neck before tightening the noose. He gritted his teeth, whispering through clenched jaws, "Old man Rourke, this time I'll gut your whole nest." The yellow light in the IA room had been replaced by Malcolm's cold white LED lamp, illuminating every speck of dust floating in the thick air of secrets. On the table, alongside Dean's files, now sat an open laptop with folders named Rourke_Invest, Rourke_Confidential. Every click of the mouse was a fuse lit under a bomb waiting to detonate in a city too used to decay. Malcolm opened the first file. Lists of real estate projects, charity funds, community grants. They looked clean on paper, but within minutes he found clear signs of money laundering. Funds looped through shell accounts under Rourke family relatives. Franklin Rourke Sr.'s name appeared over and over in every contract and internal memo. His sloppy but forceful signature acted like a seal keeping the rot hidden until someone reckless enough pried it open. Malcolm squinted, scribbling quick notes, connecting the scattered bullet points on the screen. The more he linked, the wider the web spread. Not just Dean, but an entire chain of officers Franklin had helped promote in exchange for silence, buried evidence, and loyalty on command. Malcolm grabbed a printout from the confidential data, flipping page after page, his frustration crackling in his temples like a short circuit. Some case files were missing originals, only blurry copies remained. Dates edited, lines crossed out everywhere. One case covered a missing girl that Dean once handled. The file closed with just 4 words. Insufficient evidence, rubber-stamped with Franklin's approval. Malcolm slammed his palm on the desk, the paper trembling under his hand. "Bastard," he growled, then grabbed his phone, dialing people he knew Franklin hadn't managed to buy. An hour later, in a stuffy corner office thick with sweat, 3 people sat around Malcolm. 2 veteran investigators who'd nearly been ruined by Dean, and a scruffy, acne-faced hacker whose eyes burned with sharp focus. Malcolm slid the papers toward them. This is enough to get rolling. You two sweep old cameras and storage servers. You," he pointed at the hacker, "trace the shell account IPs, dig up every deleted message." The hacker nodded, launching his laptop, keys clicking like a scalpel. The old investigators exhaled heavily, eyes flickering between doubt and excitement. Within 2 hours, the IA room's walls had turned into a living power map. Photos of Dean, Franklin Sr., shady officers pinned everywhere. At the center, a diagram of the money laundering trail linked to fake projects. Red threads stretched from Franklin's photo like toxic roots, clinging to every corner of the police department. Malcolm circled Dean's face, drew a thread connecting it to Franklin's, and scrawled, "Dirty Pawn." One colleague shook his head. "Old man Rourke's the slickest fox in this city. Going after him is signing your own death warrant, Malcolm." Malcolm didn't look up, voice slicing the air. "This rot goes to the bone. Leave it, and it'll kill us all, eventually. I'd rather cut first." The hacker snorted a dry laugh, fingers flying over keys that clicked like surgical knives. Malcolm sank into his chair, flipped open a small notebook, handwriting key points. Dean's case, fake funds, protected personnel, buried evidence. He backed up everything onto a USB drive, labeled it with a personal cipher, and tucked it into his suit's inner pocket. Looking at his team, he said firmly, "If I disappear, you dump this everywhere. Social media, press, everything. So even the top dogs can't wipe it clean." The room fell dead serious. No one cracked a smile. Suddenly, the phone on the desk buzzed, screen showing an unknown number, just a string of digits, no name. Malcolm gestured for silence, picked up and put it on speaker. A deep male voice, slightly raspy like a long-time cigar smoker, came through. "You're digging where you shouldn't, Malcolm." Short, cold, like a blade at his throat. Before Malcolm could answer, the line cut, leaving a shrill tone hanging in the air, thick with leaking secrets. Malcolm set the phone down, eyes scanning the wall crowded with photos and red threads. Dean was just bait. The real monster was still out there, drinking fine liquor and grinning for naive reporters who bought into charity facades. He tapped a finger on the USB in his pocket, drawing a slow breath to cool the fury rising in his veins. Under the stark white light, Malcolm muttered through gritted teeth, "Your web may cover this whole city, but it won't cover me. I'll cut every strand." The heavy dark brown wooden door closed behind Malcolm with a soft click that echoed like a latch, sealing in an air thick enough to choke on. The polished nameplate outside read clearly, "Chief Warren Tate." Inside, Chief Tate was hunched over, briskly signing a pile of documents on his desk, his gray suit crisp, his tie choking his throat tight. Hearing the door, he looked up, his seasoned eyes blinking once in mild surprise. "Malcolm? No appointment." His voice strained to sound calm, but Malcolm instantly caught a flicker of wariness at the bottom of the old man's eyes. Malcolm didn't bother with pleasantries. He dropped Dean's thick file hard on the glossy wooden desk. The stack bounced lightly, then settled squarely before Chief Tate. On top lay a relationship diagram, red arrows branching out from Dean Rourke to Franklin Rourke Sr. and splitting further to a host of other names, a filthy web tangled deep within the police department's guts. "Dean is just bait. The rest, we've got a nest of snakes, Chief." Malcolm's voice was dry as sandpaper, with no trace of waiting for agreement. Chief Tate leaned forward, fingers tapping lightly on the file cover before flipping the first page. Dean's disciplinary report, Franklin's signature glaring right at the approval column. He turned another page, his eyes darkened at the charity project sheet showing money laundering. A long sigh slipped out. He rubbed his temples. In those fleeting seconds, Tate's powerful face crumbled into that of a truly old man, shoulders drooping under the weight of numbers and rotten names laid bare on paper. Malcolm stood ramrod straight across from him, his tone steady but sharp as a blade. "Franklin treats this department like his backyard. Complaints buried, records wiped, dirty officers climbing ranks. If we don't clean it up, the press will, and when that happens, the one sitting in this chair," he tapped a finger on the desk, right next to the chief's nameplate, will be the first to answer for it. Chief Tate removed his glasses, pinched the bridge of his nose, then looked up at Malcolm, as if trying to gauge how much bluff hid behind that voice cold as steel. He forced a dry chuckle, but couldn't steady the quiver in his words. Malcolm, do you understand how big this is? This isn't just Dean, it's his father, a politician who could bring the whole city down with him. If this blows up, the department loses all trust. Everything we've built crumbles. Malcolm narrowed his eyes, a bitter grin clenched at the corner of his mouth. So what's your solution? Cover it up? Bury it again like the past 20 years? Stay silent so the snakes can breed more snakes? You call that protecting honor? The question slapped Tate straight. His back stiffened, a flush creeping up his face. He snapped back, voice strained but controlled. I'm not saying bury it. I'm saying handle it internally, quietly. Call the worst underlings, keep the media quiet, so this seat, he tapped the nameplate, in this department don't get torn apart. Malcolm let out a harsh laugh, his voice suddenly louder, slicing through the heavy air trapped within four walls. Do you want to keep your seat or keep the last scrap of conscience left in this place? Let me ask straight. Are you with us or shielding Franklin? Tate shot up from his chair, fingers drumming on the desk, eyes blazing. Malcolm, don't you take that tone with me. I'm the chief here. I decide who stays and who falls. But when his eyes locked onto Malcolm's icy stare, his voice caught in his throat. They stood frozen for a few seconds, only the air conditioner hissing by their ears. Finally, Tate exhaled, his voice softening to dishwater. Fine, I need a few days to arrange this. I'll find a way to do it quietly. Give me some time. Malcolm gave a slight nod, his mouth curling into a mocking smirk. He turned, hand on the door handle, then glanced back at Tate, voice steady as a hammer strike. You have 48 hours. After that, I'll do it myself. And when I do, I won't spare any seat, Chief. The wooden door swung open, then shut. Chief Tate stood frozen, his hand pressed to the file that now weighed like a boulder on his chest. Outside, Malcolm's footsteps echoed down the IA hallway, each step a tick backward on a clock counting down a rotten empire's last moments. Long after the office door closed, the suffocating air lingered, clinging to Warren Tate's back like stale smoke from decades clawing up the ranks. He sat motionless behind his desk, fingers clawing at his hair until the salt and pepper strand stuck out like a bird's nest. Malcolm's file lay sprawled, the folder bulging like a belly hiding filth too long, ready to burst. Tate sighed again, his eyes drifting to the row of windows opposite him. Outside, the city's night blinked with patrol lights, each flash of red and blue slicing the walls like invisible blades, sending shivers down his spine. If Franklin goes down, this department is finished, he muttered, voice hoarse, like a man trying to console himself. He reached into a drawer, pulling out a private phone never used for official work. His old hand trembled slightly as he dialed a familiar number, fingertip cold against the screen as if touching a snake coiled in the dark. The line picked up after 3 rings, a man's voice, low and tinged with expensive tobacco. Tate, this late. Not calling to check on my wife, are you? Tate licked his lips, glancing at the closed door, then whispered, We've got a big problem. That Malcolm kid, he has evidence, a lot. Dean, Franklin, everything. Silence on the other end for a beat, then a cold chuckle. I'll handle him, softly. You just stay put. Don't dirty your hands anymore. The call cut abruptly, a clean slice that made Tate's shoulders hunch, a shiver running through him. He stared at the file, suspicion flitting across the bold, internal confidential stamp. He sighed again, pushing the file to the far corner of the desk as if rolling a live grenade away from himself. At the other end of the IA hallway, Malcolm pushed open his own office door, his shoulder brushing past the steel frame as he crossed the final line between investigation and exposure. On his desk, the laptop was already on, its cold blue screen highlighting the lines on his sleepless face. He typed each word, the report's opening line, straight to the Justice Department. Suspect Dean Rourke has been arrested with evidence of abuse of power, assault, and criminal cover-ups. The protection network links directly to Franklin Rourke Sr. His team huddled behind him, silent, watching the resolve on his face. A resolve they'd thought long extinct in internal affairs. An old investigator with salt and pepper hair scratched his neck, voice raspy. "You think Tate will back you up? He smells Franklin and runs before we do." Malcolm didn't look up, fingers clacking steadily. "Tate's a coward. He won't dare cross me. But he's not the real snake. We aim for Franklin, not Tate." As Malcolm typed the final line, an alert pinged from a colleague's screen. Access to confidential files restricted. Malcolm's account temporarily locked. A fresh graduate gasped. "Chief's blocking you already?" Malcolm smirked, unsurprised. He shut his laptop, pulled out the USB he'd kept in his pocket, giving it a slight shake, like rattling a leash at a pack of nighttime hounds. "Locking doors won't stop me. They forget I backed everything up last week." Down the IA hallway, two plainclothes officers, badges slung around their necks, pretended to rummage through filing cabinets. Their eyes flicked repeatedly toward Malcolm's door. One whispered, "Note every move he makes." Chief said, "Just report. No touching him." Inside, Malcolm signaled his team to silence, his voice dropping to an order. "From now on, anyone outside this circle calls, you don't answer. Start the countdown. Tonight it blows up." Chief Tate still sat frozen behind his desk, the streetlight flickering on his gray suit collar, highlighting a spreading sweat stain at the nape of his neck. Through the wide glass window, the city glittered like a gold-plated dump, cars and lights shimmering, while underneath, power tunnels stank to high heaven. He shivered, recalling Malcolm's final words before leaving. "You have 48 hours. If you don't act, I will." Tate clenched his fist, inhaled like a man about to strangle himself just to cling to his seat. Back in IA, Malcolm stared at the finished report, hit send on the encrypted draft to the Justice Department, driving a metal stake deep into the swamp. He whispered under his breath, eyes flicking to the dark window corner. "Hiding behind Franklin is a dead end. I'll break his spine right in front of you, Tate. You think you can chain me? Try." Night cloaked IA in a suffocating blanket, like a sheet covering a snake pit writhing under cracked concrete. And high above, Chief Warren Tate's nameplate trembled on his door like rotten wood waiting to fall into the dust. Naomi Ellis sat alone at a corner table in an all-night cafe, the yellow neon light spilling across a notebook crammed with red and blue pen marks. She was thin, but her eyes burned bright, the kind of brightness in a person who knows everyone hates her but keeps doing the right thing anyway. Back when she worked at a major news network, Naomi once cut straight through a press conference, shoved a mic in a senator's face, and asked where the aid money had disappeared to. Result: fired, press badge revoked, old friends avoiding her like the plague. But this cafe corner, table 17, next to the outlet, had become her self-made newsroom to chase exclusive tips, dig up untouchable stories, and slam them straight at the stinking powermongers. Around 2 a.m., the cafe was nearly empty except for a few dozing students hunched over laptops. Naomi was halfway through an analysis piece on the healthcare budget when her inbox pinged, one unidentified message. She clicked it open. No subject, just one line. "If you have the guts, let the people know." Attached was a compressed video file. Naomi's heart skipped a beat as her mouse hovered over the play button. The screen flickered to life, the glow from the clip illuminating her face inches from it. A noisy street at night, shaky camera, shouts from bystanders. And then Dean Rourke, the very officer Naomi had suspected of fudging reports last year, appeared, pale-faced, hands raised as Malcolm pressed an IA badge inches from him. Naomi barely breathed. She replayed it 3 times. Each replay she added arrows to her scratch paper. Patrol car number, IA badge, Malcolm's face, civilian license plates. Everything matched. No signs of editing. Her finger dialed an old contact in the police department. The voice that answered was a whisper, like someone afraid the walls had ears. "Ellis, what the hell are you calling me for at this hour?" Naomi leaned close to the mic. "Dean got arrested. I have the clip. Don't stall." The other side sighed, then the sound of a door bolt unlocking. "Yeah, IA nailed him right in the street. You didn't hear it from me, Naomi. I've got a family." The call ended abruptly. Naomi chuckled softly, swiping her phone screen like stroking the neck of prey she'd just sunk her teeth into. She opened her leather notebook to the last page, a section labeled Risks. Her eyes scanned through crossed-out lines, lawsuits, surveillance, death threats, smear campaigns. She'd tasted them all, lost her job, lost her friends, even lost her family's faith. But in return, she had what no network boss could buy, the fear that crept up the spines of the powerful when they saw Naomi Ellis in a headline. She leaned back in her chair, eyes wide open, staring at the cafe ceiling, dotted with bug zapper lights. 1 minute of stillness, only the hiss of the milk frother behind the counter breaking it. Then, Naomi jolted upright, opened a new tab, and typed the headline. Anti-fire Internal Affairs arrests Officer Dean Rourke. What's being hidden? Her fingers hammered the keys like a machine. Naomi embedded the clip of Dean getting cornered, cited the IA's legal authority, dropped in photos of Dean standing next to Franklin Rourke Sr. back when he preached community service on TV. At the very end of the article, she slammed down a closing line like a guillotine. One dirty cop is the police department's problem. A web of cover-ups is this city's problem. The question, who's still behind Dean Rourke? The corner of her screen showed 3:27 a.m. Naomi skimmed the piece one last time, scheduled it to publish at 6:00 a.m. Right when politicians, department heads, enablers, and Franklin Rourke Sr. himself would still be sipping their morning coffee and spit it out at this slap to the face. Naomi clasped her hands behind her head, tilting her chair back against the cafe wall, eyes locked on her still-lit laptop screen, her lips pressed into a thin line, equal parts pride and fury. She muttered just loud enough for a few students nearby to glance her way. You bastards can't outrun the footage now. Outside the cafe window, a street sweeper rolled by, its yellow lights slicing the drowsy street in half. Naomi smirked, opened her notes app. Step 2, dig up Dean's grave. Step 3, drag Franklin into the light. Then she shut her eyes, her chair still rocking gently, like a fighter catching one breath before a match no referee would dare interrupt. By 7 in the morning, Naomi Ellis's shabby cafe newsroom buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. Her phone rang nonstop, emails poured in, comments exploded under her first article. The headline, Internal Affairs arrests Dean Rourke, What's Being Hidden, slapped awake half the city, still yawning in bed. The clip of Dean getting his face slammed by Malcolm's IA badge detonated like dynamite. Under the rotting power structure, politicians, dirty cops, and compliant mainstream outlets had hidden for decades. Netizens reposted the clip with comments dripping acid. Boss Dean, tough guy no more. So much for public trust, huh? Told y'all the cops are rotten? The big networks, usually parroting whatever line their bosses fed them, didn't dare ignore it this time. They scrambled to borrow Naomi's piece, tweaking headlines to be less brutal, but embedding her raw clip to rake in views. Naomi sneered when she saw the big station logos slapped on her footage. Spin it all you want. At least this time you're spinning real news. She didn't just sit back to let her first piece burn. While other reporters begged for editor approvals, Naomi dug through an old hard drive, pulling out unfinished exposés her former boss had buried under sensitive content. Exhibit A. A victim's arm broken inside Dean's station. Mother wailing at the precinct door. Dean's excuse fell down the stairs. Exhibit B. A missing girl case file. Dean in charge, closed with 3 bland bullet points. Naomi inhaled deep, tucked her hair behind her ear, and flipped through her old notes. Victim names, parents' addresses, all still intact. By noon, Naomi was standing at the doorstep of Mrs. Clare's crumbling apartment, the mother of that long-missing girl. When the old woman opened the door and saw Naomi, her wrinkled face seemed to crumple even more, but one question later, her voice cracked wide open. My daughter! She disappeared and so did the file. Dean Rourke! He smiled at me in the station. Promised he'd find her. 10 years, nothing. Naomi sat right there on the doorstep, recorder out, letting Mrs. Clare speak her heart out. Every word Naomi noted, every old photo she clipped, every proof she stored. Partly for journalism, partly because she knew, without airtight evidence, They'd claim unfounded allegation. Back at the cafe, Naomi spread out photos of Dean standing beside Franklin Rourke Sr. at a fundraising gala. Behind them, the charity logo Franklin bragged about to the press. Flanking them, city officials with greasy faces, big laughs, glasses of red wine in hand. Naomi scoffed. Dean's just a fingertip. Franklin's the damn whale. She started hammering out Article 2. Dean Rourke, a history of abuse buried by whom? Each keystroke pounded nails into the coffin of the career Franklin used to buy silence from the entire department. Midway through, a message popped up from an old editor. Ellis, careful or you'll end up floating in the river. Stop digging. Naomi typed back just 3 words. If I die, it runs. Then she opened another tab. Drafted Article 3, Franklin Rourke, Sr., the dark hand behind the badge. She didn't schedule it, but set an auto-release. Publish if no login detected for 48 hours. Ellis. By late afternoon, gray clouds swelled behind the cafe window, the yellow lights flicking on like a stage waiting for its final act. Naomi grabbed her phone, switched on her vlog camera, centered it on the pile of old and new files. Her face appeared, dark eyes burning with the recklessness forged from years of being trampled. She drew a breath, speaking slowly, like throwing down a gauntlet at the whole city's power brokers. I'm Naomi Ellis. I have Article 2, Article 3, and evidence you can't burn. If I vanish, they go live. You can't cut the internet. You can't gag the people. Go ahead. Try me. The recording light blinked steady as a heartbeat. Naomi turned it off, saved the clip to a hard drive, backed up another copy to the cloud. Outside the cafe, the city hummed like any other day, but beneath that hum, layers of filth were splitting open, just waiting for Naomi's second article to peel off the scab the powers hadn't yet managed to patch. And her, a rogue reporter with no press badge, was about to pour gasoline on it. Dylan Mercer sat alone in his cramped, rented apartment, the yellow kitchen light throwing his shadow long across the damp-stained wall. His uniform still hung on the back of a chair, his gun disassembled on the dining table next to an open can of beer. Dylan stared at his phone screen, at the clip of Dean Rourke, the superior he'd once worshipped as a hero, now cornered by some IA guy named Malcolm, a gleaming gold badge shoved in his face while the crowd jeered like fuel tossed on a smoldering garbage fire. Each replay made Dean's face paler, sweatier, and Dylan felt like he was perched on hot coals. The belief that my boss is righteous, melting away bit by bit. 4 years ago, Dylan had been a rookie patrol cop working night shifts in the West Side, a drug den where knives hid in sneakers and gaunt men crawled under concrete bridges. Dean Rourke had dragged Dylan out of an ambush once, pulled him into a patrol car, shoved a hot coffee in his hand and warned, "Listen to me. Don't wait for court. Scum aren't afraid of the law. Make them afraid of you." Back then, Dylan had believed every word. To him, Dean was the blueprint of an undercover cop, bending the law to protect the weak, scaring filth the law couldn't touch. He remembered vividly the night Dean busted down a notorious drug dealer's door, grabbed the bastard in the middle of the night, pressed a gun to his head, then told Dylan to smash the security cameras. You want him out on bail and some lawyer weaseling him free? Screw that. Dylan believed it, believed dirty hands kept the neighborhood sleeping safe. But now the clip showed a different Dean, a man arrested like a criminal, hands trembling, eyes darting at the bystanders filming him, no longer barking orders like before. Dylan reopened Naomi Ellis's article. The headlines screamed across the top. Internal Affairs arrest Dean Rourke. What's being hidden? His eyes skimmed the hundreds of comments calling Dean a guard dog, a filthy henchman, a snake in a badge. One line burned into Dylan's brain. Franklin Rourke, Sr., the dark hand behind Dean. Dylan's fingers froze on the screen. Franklin. That name Dean had once snapped at him never to mention it. Dylan had casually asked, "Boss Dean, how come you never show up at those charity galas old Franklin funds?" Dean had cuffed the back of Dylan's head playfully, but his smile was half cold. Don't be stupid. About old man Rourke? Shut up. Focus on busting criminals. Now, thinking back, Dylan felt a chill crawl up his spine. Just one question had made Dean snap. So what if Naomi was right? What if Dean wasn't the hero Dylan worshipped? What if for 4 years he'd been nothing but a guard dog for a nest of snakes that fed on the people? Dylan grabbed the beer, drained it. The bitter taste punched his empty gut. He hit replay on the clip one more time. Watching Dean kneeling before Malcolm made his throat feel like swallowing ice. One hand clutched the phone, the other typed out a message. Boss Dean, I need to talk to you. His finger hovered over send. Dylan swallowed hard. He wanted to believe Dean could explain it away, that it was a setup, that IA framed him, that the media twisted it all. But deep down, a whisper was lighting a match. Or, you've been lying to yourself, as long as Dean's been lying to you. A message notification snapped Dylan from his spiral. The screen glowed, the sender clear. Malcolm Holt, IA. Just one short line. Meet me. I know the truth about Rourke. You deserve to hear. Dylan set the phone down, hand covering his mouth. Sweat beaded at the back of his neck. A cold coil wrapping around his heart like a snake squeezing tight. Outside, the city still hummed. Sirens wailing near, then far. But in Dylan Mercer's head, the darkness whispered, if you want to know who Dean really is, there's no turning back now. The diner sat hidden at the end of a narrow alley, its flickering tube lights casting a greasy haze over chipped wooden tables and stale fried oil hanging in the air. Malcolm was already there, back to the wall, eyes on the entrance like a silent predator. Dylan Mercer stepped inside, coat collar turned up, eyes scanning until they locked on Malcolm. Dylan's breath hitched. He'd never seen an IA agent invite someone for a meal at midnight with eyes that looked ready to gut him open. Malcolm gestured to the chair across, voice casual as air. Sit, Dylan. Dylan hesitated, eyes narrowed. You setting me up or planning to cuff me right here? Malcolm smirked, lifted a steaming cup of tea, took a sip. If I wanted you arrested, I wouldn't call you to a hole-in-the-wall diner at midnight. Dylan, I don't need your hands cuffed. I need your eyes open. Dylan sat stiffly, back rigid, hand brushing his coat to check his holstered gun. Malcolm slid a stack of papers across. This is the original report of the West Side shooting. Dean doctored it, blamed the suspect for pulling a gun first. You trusted that report, didn't you? Dylan flicked a glance, sneered. You're lying. Dean didn't kill anyone innocent. That guy was scum. Dean saved an entire block from him. Malcolm chuckled softly, tapping the report with his finger. Scum? Shot in the back while cuffed? Look at the fingerprints. The bullet angle lodged in the shoulder blade. Dylan's lips trembled. He snatched the paper, eyes darting over the lines, landing on Dean Rourke's fat signature beside the corpse's fingerprint sheet. His hand shook slightly. Part of him howled. Dean had a reason, he must have. But another part, swelling like a fire in his chest, began to wonder if that reason had always been a long-running lie. Malcolm leaned in, voice low but sharp as a razor. Do you know why Dean shut you up about Franklin Rourke, Sr.? Because Dean is just Franklin's guard dog. Dean does the dirty work. Franklin reaps the rewards. You think you've been arresting criminals? No, Dylan. You've been clearing the path so the Rourkes can buy land, launder money, and silence anyone who talks. Dylan sucked in a harsh breath, half rising from his chair. Shut up. Don't pull this shit to turn me against Dean. Dean saved me from pushers. He's my brother. I trust him. Malcolm rose too, hand pressing Dylan's shoulder down, eyes burning not with hatred, but the raw anger of a man who'd seen cops turned into mafia lapdogs. Why did you become a cop, Dylan? For Dean or for the law? For the safety of the people out there or to serve a few old men in suits smoking cigars on golf courses? Malcolm's words dropped heavy like stone on stone. Dylan looked back at the report in his hands, throat dry. Part of him wanted to throw it, to shout that Malcolm was IA scum, wrecking unity. But ink doesn't lie. Fingerprints don't appear by themselves, and Dean's eyes in that clip, eyes of a man who tried to run when unmasked, clung to Dylan's mind like barbed wire. A bead of sweat slid down Dylan's temple. He lifted his gaze to Malcolm, voice ragged. "Dean, he has a private safe. Documents no one touches. I'm not sure. Don't push me." The words slipped out before he realized. Then he swallowed, hands clenching. "Forget it. I don't know anything. I'm out of here." Malcolm didn't stop him. He only placed a hand on Dylan's shoulder, squeezed gently, as if anchoring him to something real. "You're not betraying Dean, Dylan. You're saving what little honor is left in that station. Think hard. Keep guarding the snake's door, or be a real lawman for once." Dylan didn't answer. He pulled away, grabbed the report, and staggered out like fleeing his own shadow. Through the greasy window, Malcolm sat unmoving, eyes tracking Dylan's silhouette fading into the hazy streetlights. He gave a slight nod, lips pressed into the grim line of a man who'd baited a guard dog and knew for certain it had bitten. In Dylan's trembling hand, the report shook with every step, like a wound bleeding drop by drop. "Dean, how long have you been lying to me?" he murmured, voice lost in the hum of passing cars. And somewhere behind, Malcolm waited, patient as a scalpel poised for one last cut to sever the final chain binding Dylan to the name Rourke. Malcolm sat in the Internal Affairs IA office, the harsh white ceiling light glaring straight down on a table cluttered with files, sticky notes, and red marker streaks that looked like dried blood frozen on paper. He drummed his fingers on the tabletop, eyes scanning the list of officers closest to Dean Rourke Jr., the ones Dean had proudly called his arm squad to keep the streets clean, but Malcolm no longer believed in that version of clean. He believed in the smell, the stench of dirty money, forged signatures, innocent blood, and the fear of those who wore uniforms just to guard the rats feeding off the city's gut. After the lead on Dean's private safe that Dylan Mercer had let slip the day before, Malcolm ordered the IA team to comb through the financial records of every officer under Dean's thumb. Investigators quietly split up the data files, punched in passwords, pulled up patrol reports spanning the last 3 years. The dry rustle of paper and the click of mice filled the shuttered, curtained room, a bubble of truth-seeking inside a police department that, just beyond the door, pretended nothing rotten hid under its fresh coat of paint. A young investigator, eyes sunken from an all-nighter, pushed a pile of files toward Malcolm. "Boss, look at this. Bourbon 88, reported twice for liquor license violations and disturbances, but 2 weeks later, reopened under a new name, Moonlight Lounge. Same owner. Who signed off on the new permit? Dean himself." Malcolm raised an eyebrow, gave a tight nod, tapping his pen on the table. "Next." Another investigator pointed at a stack of fine receipts, voice hoarse. "Same pattern. Bars fined, 10 grand. Then the money vanishes from city revenue records. Locals say bar owners pay protection money directly. In return, cops stand guard outside. Nobody dares mess with them." Malcolm leaned forward, snapped a ballpoint pen clean in half, his eyes locked on a pinned map of nightlife hotspots behind him. Red dots marked each dirty bar, connected by white string, webbing into a tangled net. In the center, a photo of Dean Rourke Jr. grinning beside his patrol cars, captain's bars gleaming, once hailed by the press as the steel shield of the night, but that was just the surface. Malcolm flipped open the ghost cases file, petty theft arrests, report stamped, caught in the act, repeat offender. But when IA checked court records, no verdicts, no trial dates. Instead, the suspects were always homeless. No family, no lawyer. Malcolm slammed the file down, shot to his feet. They faked cases to pad stats, to report the streets clean so they were free to milk money from those filthy bars. Dean raised a nest of rats right under his own arm. The room fell silent. A few IA officers exchanged pale looks. An older investigator spat through clenched teeth. So, Dean's crew ran protection rackets and framed the poor to fill arrest quotas. That bastard. Malcolm swept a hand, pointing sharply at each team member. "Tim, cross-check bar cameras with patrol reports. Linda, build a witness list. I want the bar managers in this week. Peter, prep the warrant to crack Dean's safe." Dylan was right. That paperwork is the key to this nest. Heads nodded, chairs squeaked as people grabbed laptops, clipped files, and filed out of the room. Malcolm stood still for a beat longer, eyes flicking to the corkboard plastered with Dean, Franklin Rourke Sr., and the newly tagged officers branded henchmen. The white light doubled his shadow on the wall, a lone figure guarding the gates of the dark. He muttered, voice gravelly, each word hurled like a rock at the snakes slithering in the shadows. This nest stinks to the rafters, and I swear I'll smoke you all out into the light. A fine drizzle fell like a damp veil over the city's night streets. Malcolm sat inside a plain silver sedan, hand gripping an old radio, eyes fixed on the rain-specked windshield ahead, where the Moonlight Lounge neon sign flickered purple among rows of nightlife facades. In his earpiece, Linda's whisper came through. Team 2 ready. Bourbon 88 staff reported counting out end-of-shift cash. Malcolm replied softly, as if to himself. Copy. Tonight we ripped the nest open. The car rolled to the curb, door popping open. 3 figures in dark jackets melted into the street crowd, laughing patrons, cigarette smoke, and bass thumping out onto the sidewalk. No sirens, no red and blue strobes, just IA breath mingling with booze and stale hookah fumes. Malcolm brushed shoulders with Linda, signaling a split. He pushed through Moonlight Lounge's front door, letting the flickering lights reflect an eye scanning every corner. At the bar, a waiter with a cross-body satchel slipped out of the VIP room, muttering into his phone, stuffing small stacks of cash into his bag. One nod from Malcolm, and Linda closed in, flashing her IA badge inches from his nose. The waiter froze, lips stuttering. I just handle the protection money. I don't know anything else." Malcolm pressed a firm hand on his shoulder, leaned close, words cold steel. "Protection money, for who? Dean Rourke, right?" The waiter bobbed his head frantically, sweat soaking the collar of his cheap shirt. "Yes, Captain Dean, the plainclothes guys collect every week. If we don't pay, homeless gangs smash the place. I'm just the errand boy." While Linda cuffed the waiter, Malcolm popped open the safe behind the liquor shelf. A small black ledger fell out, leather edges worn. Inside, columns of bar names, payment sums, collector initials. Malcolm held the ledger up to the bar manager, who trembled behind the counter. "I want every name, phone number, drop spot, and any envelopes you haven't handed over yet, or you do 10 years for laundering." The manager sobbed, pointing at a backup safe under the counter. Malcolm kicked it open, yanking out bundles of envelopes stamped Rourke Charity Fund. He let out a dry laugh, raw as salt rubbed into filth. Protection money laundered as charity donations? Same old scam. They really thought nobody would dare flip this rock? Outside, Teams 2 and 3 hustled other bar managers into patrol cars. An investigator leaned close to Malcolm. "Boss, one street guy spilled. Dean's just the bag man. All orders come from the old man," meaning Franklin Rourke Sr. Malcolm nodded tightly, lips a grim line, memorizing every piece. "Good. Tonight we crack the nest. Tomorrow we bait the king snake." Inside the bar's back office, Malcolm made the manager pull more records. Party invites, charity receipts, every sheet stamped with Franklin Rourke Sr.'s seal. Staff cowered as Malcolm snarled, "Your big boss loves charity? Fine. I'll make sure he donates straight to federal prison." Near dawn, fine mist clung to Malcolm's face as he leaned against a patrol car. In his hands, a bundle of black ledgers, envelopes, bar lists, and breadcrumbs leading straight to the Rourke family's silk-draped dinner table. He watched the streetlights glow dull gold through the windshield, exhaling slow, voice rough as an oath spat into the wet night. "Franklin, the more I peel, the filthier you reek, and I swear I'll shove that stench in your face." Live on TV, the city hadn't even fallen back asleep yet, but the rat nest was already cracking open, and Malcolm knew the king snake was now breathing down his neck, every hour, every minute. Franklin Rourke Sr.'s private office sat on the top floor of the skyscraper that bore his own name, a cold glass block reflecting the city's lights like serpent scales glinting under moonlight. Inside, the space was lined with expensive oak panels, the black leather chair slightly cracked from years of Franklin's aging back settling into it, though his mind still sliced sharp as an autopsy blade. On the walls hung rows of framed photos, Franklin beaming while shaking the governor's hand, an arm around the mayor, handing out scholarships to poor children, a benevolent face that hid a shark's jaw, gnawing through cash and picking its teeth with people's blood. Franklin listened to his aide read a report. Mr. Holt, IA, led a raid on 3 bars last night. They seized a black ledger with your charity fund's stamp on it. The last line barely brushed the aide's lips, but Franklin heard every syllable, nodded slowly, then smiled. The old man leaned back in his leather chair, finger tapping on the glass desktop. At his age, most people slow down. Franklin's mind never had. His anger never roared. It hissed through clenched teeth, like a cobra coiled inside his skull. He flipped open an old cell phone, a toy his security team proudly claimed was unwiretappable. His thin finger dialed a familiar number, each press like a nail driven into someone's coffin. The other end clicked on. Chief Tate's voice clogged in his throat. I'm here, Mr. Rourke. Franklin wasted no greeting, no fluff. Tate, you've lost control. You let an IA mutt dig through my backyard. How long do you think you'll keep that chief's seat now? Chief Tate swallowed hard, his palm slick with sweat. He squinted at the IA caseboard across his desk, where the name Malcolm Holt had been a stone in his throat for weeks now. Mr. Rourke? Holt's stubborn. He won't listen to me. I tried limiting files, restricting his movement, but he always slips through. Franklin chuckled dryly, switching the phone to his other ear, voice slicing like a paper blade. Then you haven't tried hard enough. You sit in that chair not to admire your office, but to block every rabid dog threatening the nest I keep warm. Understand? Tate stammered. I just need more time. I'll talk to Holt. I'll bury the bar story. Franklin cut him off, voice dropping to a chilling murmur like midnight liquor. I'll feed the press instead. Sensational headlines. IA inspector abuses power, crushes hero Dean Rourke. IA breaks protocol for personal revenge. I have people who sell rumors, writers who crawl in the dirt. How long do you think Holt can stand before the mob demands his badge? Chief Tate's breathing turned ragged, a faint groan escaping. Please, sir, don't force my hand. Holt has public support. If I squeeze too hard, IA will blow back. You know the press now? Franklin laughed, soft as a lullaby but reeking of poison. You're naive, Tate. The press now? The press are hounds I feed every month. You just do one thing. Give me 3 days. Drag Holt through the mud. Once the people are bored, I'll wipe him out. No tears shed. Tate clutched the phone, vision blurred by the piles of IA files littering his desk. Malcolm Holt, a nightmare he couldn't rein in anymore. 3 days. I'll try. Franklin inhaled slowly, words hissing through his perfect dentures. 3 days. If not, I'll cut the department's maintenance budget. Cut the community fund you lean on to look good. And you'll lose that chief's chair faster than Holt loses his badge. Tate didn't answer. He just nodded, dumbly, though the other end couldn't see it. The call cut. The beep, beep droned cold in his ear. Franklin set the phone down, lips curling into a faint, cigar-scented smile, eyes glittering with the same winning glint he'd used to strangle threats in their cribs for decades. In the chief's office, Tate let the phone slip from his grip, clattering to the floor. He slumped behind his desk, breath ragged. The flickering tube light cast his shadow across the IA wall, the pinned name Malcolm Holt now swallowed under Tate's dark outline. But overshadowing both was Franklin's monstrous presence, a curse drowning every scrap of hope in mud. Franklin Rourke Sr.'s dining room was solemnly quiet, a chandelier spilling light over a long walnut table draped in white linen. In front of the old man lay a plate of rare veal dripping dark red sauce, a goblet of wine swirling like grape blood. But Franklin didn't touch his knife, nor glance at the food, his eyes fixed on a tablet propped beside his plate, where his greasy-faced, dirty PR man hunched, rattling off bullet points for the smear piece on Malcolm Holt. The PR man bowed low, voice stammering. "We'll leak that Holt's purging IA for personal revenge against Dean Rourke. I've bought 3 tabloids, got our loyal bloggers ready to dig up personal dirt. Divorce, old spats with past bosses, rumors of embezzlement." Franklin nodded approvingly, tapping his wine glass with a slender finger. "Don't lay it on too thick. Let people trust the rumors. Let them split into factions. Holt's stubborn, but his IA crew is worse. Shatter his team's trust, and I don't need to kill him. He'll rot on his own feet." The PR man bowed and scurried off. Franklin poured more wine, smirking at his reflection in the polished glass walls. The old man had fed reporters, bought journalists, and slipped money to TV networks for 20 years. Parasites that barked on cue with a finger snap. And Holt, an IA mutt daring to crack this nest? That dog was about to get its face slammed in the mud. By dawn the next morning, before IA had even brewed their coffee, headlines exploded in inboxes like grenades. Inspector Malcolm Holt, cop or executioner, cleaning house for the chief's chair. Insider tip, Holt hated Dean since police academy days. Tabloid poison spread like mold after rain. Online comments boiled over. IA's just mobsters in uniform. Holt's just another power-hungry dog. In IA's hallway, older investigators loyal to Malcolm still stood near him, but others started avoiding eye contact, whispering behind his back. Malcolm stepped into the meeting room, slapped real files down on the table, face stone cold, though he heard the murmurs outside. He bagged Dean just to clear a path to the chief's seat. "Justice my ass." A young investigator who'd once idolized Malcolm stammered while handing over a stack of tabloids. "Boss, I have to ask straight, do you have some old beef with Dean, or is this—" Malcolm looked him dead in the eyes. Didn't yell, didn't defend. He just shoved the files across for everyone to see. Photos of Dean shaking hands with mobsters, forged reports, the bar's black ledger from the raid. His voice was hoarse but hard as a hammer. "If you don't believe me, look at Dean's own signature. I didn't arrest him because I hate him. I arrested him because he's filth wearing our badge." While IA wavered, Franklin struck again. Anonymous emails flooded Malcolm's inbox. Pictures of his ex-wife's house, his teenage son at school, a single chilling line, "Stop now or the Holt name gets a pretty funeral." One of Malcolm's teammates got a message leaking his home address, plus snapshots of a strange car parked out front all night. Malcolm flung open the IA office door, sweeping his eyes over the team. Nobody dared joke now. He rapped his knuckles lightly on the table, voice calm but final as a judge's gavel. "If you're scared, step back. If you want to keep gutting this nest, prep your paperwork, your body armor, and get your family somewhere safe. From tonight on, every step we take, someone's watching. Don't expect the press to save us. The press is too busy licking snake shit to live." Outside, in his plush leather-wrapped office, Franklin Rourke Sr. lounged back in an armchair, TV flickering with a smirking pundit, mocking IA for tearing itself apart over a job title. The old man sipped his wine, glass clicking his dentures in a spine-chilling clink. His eyes were unfocused, but deadly. "Let's see how long you last, Malcolm Holt. I've shredded hunting dogs before, and the night city swallowed gossip like a rotting rat carcass, leaving Malcolm alone in a ring of doubt, standing unbowed like a lone shadow that knew truth still cut deeper than every smear Franklin smeared across IA's walls. Naomi Ellis sat cross-legged on her usual rickety wooden chair in the corner of a 24/7 cafe, the laptop's harsh blue glare bouncing off her red, sleepless eyes after 3 nights awake. The ceiling fan squealed overhead, the burnt coffee aroma lingered, and the half-dozing students at the next table had no clue a bomb was about to go off right where she sat. Her inbox pinged. One attachment. No subject, no text. Just one file name. Rourke_branch_truth_zep. Naomi's finger hovered over the trackpad, trembling slightly. She glanced around the cafe, jazz crackling from an old speaker like a dare to her courage. One deep breath. The click of the mouse was small but sharp. a nail hammering the coffin lid of hidden truth. The folder exploded open, over 200 pages. Bar ledgers, internal IA reports, hidden camera shots of Dean shaking hands with shady club managers, the bloody, red-embossed stamp of the Rourke Charity Fund. Naomi knew one leaked page could torch Franklin's carefully spun media web of 3 mayoral terms like dry straw, kissing flame. She plugged in her earbuds, opened the first PDF, IA internal minutes, Dean's scrawled signature, the official seal faint but real enough to shatter his hero cop image the big news outlets worshipped. Naomi grabbed her phone, speed-dialed a few old contacts in the force. Look at this stamp. IA standard, yes. A hushed voice on the line. It's legit. Naomi, don't drag me in. You know how hot this fire burns. Naomi hung up, a dry laugh curling her lip. Relax. I play alone. By 4 a.m., she was still pounding keys like a fiend on nicotine. The headline filled the screen in bold. From Dean to Franklin, the dirty web behind the badge. Below it, Naomi slammed out her lead. They protect you. No, they protect each other. Protect the money, protect the power. She attached a full zip link, writing under it, I won't apologize for letting you read for yourselves. When the law sleeps, the people wake up. Then a 3-minute clip Naomi filmed right there at the cafe table. She stood, hollow-eyed but fire burning behind them, waving the report. This is the proof you need to see. Don't trust me, read it. From Dean Rourke, the city's night hound, to Franklin Rourke Sr., the wine-pouring buddy of the mayor. All of it, one nest. 5:59 AME. Naomi reread the piece, checked the link one last time, and hit publish right as the minute hand kissed 12. In that still second before dawn, she heard her own heartbeat, loud and true, beating for every year blacklisted from stations, every death threat, every night like this, knowing her life now hinged on the crowd hitting share. The article went live, and her phone on the table buzzed violently. Messages poured in from mainstream reporters. Ellis, what the hell, you leaked everything? Give us an exclusive interview. You're sitting on a nuke. Naomi's smirk typed back one word, too late. On Twitter, Rourke Files shot straight to trending in 20 minutes. Her clip, waving the report and shouting, "Read it, don't trust me," became an instant meme. Kids subtitled it, remixed it into rap, spammed it like wildfire. Major outlets scrambled. Political commentators pieced threads together. Breakfast shows dropped weather updates for breakdowns on Franklin's citywide web. At 7 a.m., Naomi slumped back, forehead resting on the steaming cafe table, one hand still clutching her phone, eyes fixed on share counts and zip downloads skyrocketing into tens of thousands. Notifications pinged and pinged, but Naomi no longer needed to read them. She whispered to herself, just loud enough for her own ears, but cutting straight through every glass panel in Franklin Rourke Sr.'s high-rise office, "You've got money, Franklin. I've got the people." The clip Naomi dropped poured gasoline on an old fire smoldering under the city's night skin. Within hours, those filthy pages, fake charity seals, photos of Dean toasting with gang runners, and Franklin beaming beside the mayor, were printed out, plastered on lampposts, brick walls, bus stops. Civil rights groups latched onto this spark like a final blade to slash open the city's painted mask of social order the Rourke Dynasty had lacquered for 2 decades. Clean the badge, Rourke Files stuck to every status, from college student groups to PTA pages to black church feeds. One elderly pastor went live from his church steps, voice hoarse but quaking with fury. For years, our kids were dragged to cells, guns shoved in their faces, and Dean muzzled the press. Today, we have proof. Today, we will not be silent. That night, families once railroaded by Dean stepped forward, stories flooding the net. A mother cradled a framed photo of her dead son. He was 19, just smoked weed. Dean said he fell downstairs. Nobody dared sue. Now, I fear no one. Her stream was reshared hundreds of thousands of times, turning into the symbol of a rage long strangled. By midday, the streets turned into a swelling ocean of people. Student groups with checkered scarves, drummers pounding out a march beat, crowds of all ages bearing banners. No justice, no peace. Kill the snakes. Chants rose and crashed like thunder, rolling down avenues once filled only with car horns and patrol megaphones. Single mothers led from the front, babies in arms, holding photos of Dean and Franklin chanting their names without a flicker of fear. From the third-floor window of IA, Malcolm Holt stood motionless, shoulders tilted forward, eyes locked through cracked glass at the masses filling the street beneath him. Red banners snapped in the wind, loudspeakers rasped hoarse calls for justice, sun-scorched faces blinking, unflinching at riot shields. A young investigator, cigarette ash still clinging to his collar, edged up beside Malcolm, voice trembling at his own question. "Boss, aren't you afraid they'll lose control? If the streets burn, IA bleeds first." Malcolm never looked away from the sea below. He curled his lip into a grin, swallowing the taste of tear gas that still haunted him. "I'm more afraid if they stay silent. Silence is the real death." A few blocks away, atop Rourke Tower, Franklin Rourke Sr. stubbed out a cigarette into a crystal ashtray, his hand trembling, though his lips clamped another stick tight. A massive TV screen played drone shots of the protest flood. His name splashed across the lower third, larger than the trending hashtags. Franklin Rourke. He dragged a breath through yellowed teeth, exhaled smoke, eyes cloudy like an old crocodile. "These black dogs, they dare bite back? Ungrateful mutts who forgot who feeds them." At City Hall, the mayor, who once laughed and drank with Franklin, was now swarmed by reporters like flies on a fresh wound. Sweat dripped down his flushed face as microphones crowded his chin. "Mr. Mayor, will you launch a full investigation into the police force? Will you cut the Rourke family off from public funds?" He stammered. We're considering forming an independent IA oversight committee. Transparency is our top priority." Back in her shabby cafe, Naomi Ellis pulled her coat tight, leaned against the wall, laptop cam-rolling her live. Under the frame, her eyes were ringed black but blazing. The street roar seeped through the windows behind her. Naomi laughed, voice ragged as ash but still burning. "If you see me still here, the snake nest isn't safe yet. If I vanish, you know what to do. Keep the lights on. Trust no one but yourselves." On her live feed, comments tore by. "We're here because of you. Clean the badge. Expose our Rourke." And in the streets, the chant thundered up and down. No justice, no peace. Pounding the stone walls of IA, Rourke Tower, and the entire city that had slept soundly on envelopes stamped red for too long. Dylan Mercer's apartment was tucked away inside a crumbling old housing block, peeling paint, leaking pipes that dripped all night. He used to tune out those leaks when he still believed filth existed everywhere, but as long as Dean Rourke was around, it would be cleaned up. Now, Dylan sat motionless on a rusted metal chair, eyes locked on an old yellowed photo taped to the opposite wall. In the photo, Dylan was fresh-faced, buzz-cut, flashing a chipped tooth from a fight at 19. Beside him, Dean Rourke had his arm draped over Dylan's shoulders, holding up his shining police badge under the training camp sun. In the corner, Dean had neatly written, "To my blood brother, a guard dog never abandons family." Outside the cracked window, drums and chants from the protest crowd hammered relentlessly. Ever since Naomi had dumped the files, IA raided the bars, Malcolm cracked Dean's safe, the city had become a furnace for community fury. Dylan knew the people outside now called Dean the demon of the night streets. But inside these peeling walls, Dylan could still hear Dean's voice echoing, the same voice that taught him how to bend the law and promised to shield him whenever IA sniffed too close. And his squad? They'd begun whispering behind Dylan's back. The rookies dodged his gaze like it carried plague. One night shift cop, half drunk, had hissed in the locker room, "Mercer? Dean's lapdog. God knows what he's hiding." Dylan heard it, only sneered, swallowing it like a chunk of ice. Tonight, sleep was impossible. He rummaged in his old file cabinet, pulling out a small cloth-wrapped recorder. The gadget Dean once said was for bagging scum red-handed only, but one drunken night months ago, Dylan had secretly switched it on. tucked it in his pocket. Back then, he thought it'd be a funny prank for when the boss was sloshed. Now it was his last ticket to save what little soul he had left. He slid on his headphones, fingers trembling as he pressed play. The buzz of a rowdy bar, the clink of beer bottles, and then Dean's voice, slurred, laughing. I told 'em, skim off the bar cash every week, you hear? Money flows up to old man Franklin, he funnels it back down as charity funds. The street scum can hashtag all they want. I feed you bastards, so sit tight and enjoy it. You get me? Dylan broke into a sweat, as if drenched. His finger hovered over pause, then dropped. His eyes stayed fixed on the window, where the protest's red flare lights swept the street like a sea of fire. The chant blurred up through the glass. No justices. No peace. 3 words drumming in his skull, choking out the fantasy Dean is a hero he'd clung to since the day he first pinned on a badge. He knew if this file leaked, Dean, if Malcolm didn't crush him first, would collapse on his own spine. And Franklin Rourke Sr., the old man, would hunt Dylan down to the city's last gutter. But Dylan also knew, if he stayed silent, he'd be shoving his own head down the same trash pit Dean had once taught him to dig for others. Dylan laughed. Dry, raw, like slicing his own throat to be free. He pulled out a USB drive, trembling as he copied the audio file over, watching the percent bar crawl across the cracked old laptop screen. Outside, loudspeakers screeched. The crowd roared Dean's name like a curse, spat at a ghost skulking through the police precinct. Copy complete. Dylan tucked the USB deep into his jacket's inner pocket, right over his heart. One long breath. He looked at Dean's signed photo one last time. His eyes reddened, not from fear, not from regret, but because the old superstition had finally died inside his ribcage. He whispered, voice sandpaper rough. Time to smash this idol, Dean. You taught me to be a guard dog. Now I'm tearing down this filthy gate for good. The apartment door swung open. Dylan stepped out, didn't look back, didn't shut it. The cold night air bit deep into his lungs, but his eyes burned bright. For the first time, not to guard someone else's secrets, but to guard himself. The abandoned lot lay hidden at the end of the industrial street, a graveyard of rusted cars, concrete walls scarred with old graffiti. Night wind hissed through the gaps, carrying the stink of rust and stale puddles. Malcolm stood dead center, gray coat pulled up to his neck, eyes scanning every shadow. He'd done this scene 100 times, meeting traitors, the terrified, the ones begging to shed old skins. But this was different. The man he waited for was once Dean's most trusted pit bull. Footsteps splashed through puddles. Dylan Mercer emerged from the dark, hoodie pulled low, hands buried deep, steps heavy as if dragging stone shackles. The 2 men faced each other, only a few paces apart, yet separated by the thin line between a nest of snakes and the last flicker of justice left in this rotting city. Dylan didn't waste time, no greeting, no preamble. He yanked a tiny black USB from his pocket, clutching it in a bone-white fist. He wouldn't meet Malcolm's eyes for long, voice raspy from a night's worth of cigarettes. Here, recording file. Dean, drunk, bragging about the money, the cover-ups. I was at that table too. I laughed too. I'm dirty too. But at least I'm not silent anymore. Malcolm didn't snatch it. He just stared at Dylan for a long, deep second, an IA stare measuring whether this was a half-coward or a man who just carved the knife from his own throat. He pulled out a small laptop, plugged in the USB, slipped on his earphones, and hit play. In the dead lot, Dean's voice snarled, glasses clinked, a wet, raspy laugh. Franklin only needs this badge to clean anything up. Bar money flips to charity money. Any street scum barking too loud? Shut 'em up. I told you punks already, don't fear the law. The law's asleep. Malcolm closed the file. Far-off streetlights cast a dim line across his face. For the first time, his look at Dylan carried no suspicion. It was the silent nod of a man handed a blade, knowing the giver had just slit his own throat first. Dylan exhaled, breath misting in the cold. He lowered his head like a penitent before a priest. I know the fake vagrant cases at Westside Station. I forged those reports. Dean taught me how to kill the cameras, how to slip fake files in the safe. Back then I thought keeping the streets clean, but it was just about keeping his cash flow quiet with Franklin. I feared Dean, truly. But now I fear the people more. Fear they'll drag my corpse out, spit in my face for guarding his gate. Malcolm shut the laptop, gripping the USB like the final nail for the Rourke family's coffin. He placed a hand on Dylan's shoulder, firm but not crushing, enough for a once-shivering cop to feel a shard of forgiveness. You just saved yourself, Dylan, and you just saved what's left of IA that Dean didn't rot out. Step out from his shadow. From now on, IA protects you as a living witness. I won't let Franklin's hounds touch a single hair on you. Dylan nodded. His cracked lips twitched as if to say more, but only released a sigh. He turned, trudging to the edge of the lot, puddles echoing underfoot. The first cold drizzle fell, washing sweat and the last stink of Dean's leash off his back after 4 long years as a gate dog. He paused under the rusted gate, tipped his face into the night rain, whispering just for himself, "Dean, I'm not your guard dog anymore. Dig your own grave." Meanwhile, Malcolm stood alone in the lot, clutching the USB like a spike driven straight into the Rourke clan's coffin lid. He strode out slowly, eyes flicking to the riot-lit streets beyond, thousands of signs demanding justice glowing under street lamps. Malcolm muttered to himself, a dry laugh split across his lips. "Game's over, Franklin. Time to choke on your own rot. 30 damn years in the making." After the hearing that exposed the Rourke family, Malcolm Shaw naturally became a household name in Sacramento, hailed as the IA sword who dared sever a power cord that had festered for decades. The traffic stop clip, Naomi's exposé, and every share plastered Malcolm's face across headlines, news tickers, and morning cafe gossip alike. But Dean Rourke didn't vanish as neatly as his badge-stripping verdict had promised. He knew losing public authority didn't mean losing every hidden arm beneath the swamp. A week after the hearing, Dean sat silently in a dingy rental apartment, scrolling his phone through old contacts. The same guys who once poured his drinks, split envelopes, cleaned up messes on cue. One of them fished up the perfect bait, a hostess, the kind tucked into the black books of a nightclub once greased by Dean's protection money. She'd be obedient with that old debt hanging overhead, and more than willing to perform for a payoff. The opening act was staged so neatly that it looked like a populist soap opera. At a community press event co-hosted by IA and Naomi, she slipped into the crowd, waited for the jostle, then stumbled hard into Malcolm. His dress shirt caught a splash of coffee, and her trembling hand offered tissues, lips curling in a pale smile, just enough for camera flashes to snag a few unusually cozy frames. In those few minutes, a tiny mic was slipped into his briefcase, and before she slipped away, a hidden minicam had already been planted in a file cabinet by his desk. It was too slick, too fast. Even a seasoned IA detective couldn't have smelled it in time. That night, Malcolm worked late, as usual. The dossier on patrol lines linked to corruption still lay spread open, new hints unearthed thanks to Dylan Mercer. He was deep in it when the office buzzer chirped. The same girl appeared again, clutching a bottle of wine wrapped in red ribbon, mumbling about a thank-you gift from neighborhood folks for the man who smashed Rourke's face. Malcolm frowned, ready to refuse, but her teary eyes made him hesitate, so he let her in. One bottle of wine couldn't drown a sharp Malcolm, but a shoulder brush, a giggly lean, a too-casual laugh, that was enough for a long lens across the street to catch its moment. Outside the building, Dean's goons stood statue still, camera rig trained tight, framing it so cleanly that with a quick cut and some canned giggles, the world would see IA Chief boozes and fondles nightclub girls on duty. So much for that sword of justice. Dean Rourke flicked his cigarette butt onto the damp pavement, lips twisting into a rusty snort. IA sword. Watch it snap. By dawn, Sacramento hadn't even shed the night's mist before a swarm of tabloid headlines drowned the city in cheap delight. Bloody red clickbait screamed, "Dirty IA. Malcolm Shaw takes sex bribes to bury files." A shaky, cropped clip. Malcolm with a wine glass. The girl giggling, a shadow brushing the lens. Just enough to bait the crowd. Thousands of comments detonated instantly. Some howled to hang the IA badge on a public hook. Others doubted, but their voices were drowned out by trash sites that outpaced any counter-report. Chief Warren Tate sat behind the emergency table, his pen tapping heavily on the urgent memo. Eyes bloodshot from no sleep, but his tone still hard. "Malcolm, I have to pull you off the Rourke files, just for now, to protect the department's image." Malcolm didn't argue. He stood, nodded, took his IA badge back to his old office, the wooden door shutting out every hallway whisper. Alone behind 4 familiar walls, he gripped the badge so tight its metal frame left red grooves in his palm. He knew this trap wasn't designed to kill him, legally. It was meant to kill public trust, to bury the justice sword he'd just reforged. Naomi Ellis raced the clock, dropping a counter-report by noon, cutting in a lobby guard's interview, hallway cams proving the girl never stayed more than 10 minutes, never got near the real files. But the hashtag, Dirty IA, ballooned like a sandstorm, sweeping away every fact. That afternoon, Malcolm called Dylan Mercer on a private line. His voice had lost the steely edge of an IA chief, left only a raspy dryness. "Dylan, you still got a hook in those clubs? Drag that manager out. Squeeze who paid for this setup. I don't need my face clean. I need the head behind that wire." Dylan stayed silent a few beats, then answered flat, "Be careful. Cornered rats play dirtier than ever." Malcolm leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on the blinking breaking news on the wall-mount TV. In that swirl of rumor sludge, only one thing stayed real. The dirty wire hadn't snapped yet, and he'd drag it into daylight himself, even if he had to bury this IA badge in the mud with it. Malcolm Shaw was summoned in the middle of the night. No formal document, just a hastily printed internal summons stamped with a deep red IA seal like dried blood. The closed-door hearing room at the end of the third-floor hallway glowed harshly under fluorescent lights, bouncing off the dark wood table and the averted eyes of 3 junior investigators. Chief Warren Tate sat at the head, hand gripping the disciplinary gavel skewed beside a stack of files. The accusation was brief, Tate's voice rising, slow and heavy like reading a death sentence. "Conduct unbecoming of an officer. Signs of abusing position for personal gain. Tarnishing IA's image. The so-called evidence, a shaky, grainy clip, a few lines of statement from an anonymous witness, the very girl hired to stage the smear." Malcolm sat upright, his shirt shoulders still damp from the rain at the gate. He didn't ramble a defense, didn't protest, only repeated one line, his voice flat as a steel spike driven into the floor. "I never touched what they call evidence, because it isn't evidence, it's a trap." Chief Tate lifted his eyes, aged but still flint-edged at the corners. He knew exactly who this trap was for, how rotten its stench was. But outside, the public storm raged, the Rourke machine behind it still alive. Tate had to drop the gavel. "You're suspended, Shaw, until this clears up. It's a safeguard for IA, not just you." The room felt vacated of breath when Malcolm stood. His shoes struck the polished floor with a dry crack, like a hammer on an iron beam. He didn't nod farewell, just flicked a glance at the young faces. Rookies who once called him IA's shield, now frozen silent, watching that shield fracture. An hour later, the metal door swung shut behind him, severing all murmurs inside. He strode past rows of desks still lit, leaving behind eyes equal parts respect and shaken faith. Hours ago, they'd held their heads high because he stood in the storm's teeth. Now, the wind was gone, but the real storm had slipped inside IA's gut, squeezing every lung. Outside the precinct gate, Naomi Ellis lingered under a skinny tree. She shadowed Malcolm's car in silence. No questions, no interview, no mic shoved in his face. In her mind, only one line looped. They framed you with a fake clip. I'll kill the fake with the real. Sacramento's night sky split open with sudden rain, drumming dust and exhaust off the streets, like trying to rinse filth caked on for decades. Naomi, coat zipped tight to her chin, slipped down a dark alley behind the nightclub that once fattened Dean Rourke's pockets. A former security guard hunched under a rusted awning, cigarette glowing, eyes darting like a rat sniffing for traps. Naomi didn't waste words, just pressed a bundle of small bills into his chest with a blunt promise. I'll cover you if they come asking where you were tonight. He bit his lip, grimy fingers scratching under his cap brim, then quietly spilled it. The club's security cams had raw footage of the setup night, but the file got wiped from the main server by morning. The last person with a copy? None other than Dylan Mercer, Dean's ex-foot soldier, now straddling the razor's edge between whistleblower and a corpse. Meanwhile, Dylan Mercer crouched beneath the overhang of an abandoned train station at the city's fringe. Streetlights bent through the rain, stretching Dylan's shadow long over a gray puddle. In his coat pocket, a tiny memory card weighed on him like an anvil. He'd gripped it for 3 hours straight, too scared to stash it at the station, too scared to take it home. Malcolm Shaw appeared soundlessly. His dark shirt clung wet, shoulders heavy as the rain-soaked night itself. He stopped a single arm's reach from Dylan, needing no long speech. Dylan's hand trembled slightly as he held the card out. The original's intact. You got framed. I don't want to be next. Malcolm took it, thumb brushing the edge like testing a sharp blade. His eyes locked on Dylan's, voice deep and thunder rough. You still have time to crawl out of this muck. But if you don't name who paid for this, tomorrow the tabloids will gut you alive for copy. Rain hammered the station's corrugated roof like a pounding heart. Dylan sucked in breath, shut his eyes, and whispered the name Malcolm had already guessed. A benefactor, filthily tangled with the Rourke father-son syndicate since its birth. Malcolm's stare darkened, the raw card in his palm like a silver bullet cocked for a kill shot at what's left standing. A few steps away, Naomi watched, still as stone, her pocket cam rolling silently under her raincoat, capturing every second of the handover. She knew the raw file might vanish again, but a clip of Dylan handing it over would incinerate every second smear attempt if some bastard dared drop another trap tomorrow night. The rain kept pouring, drumming the rusty station roof, streaming down Malcolm's sleeves. He raised his eyes to the far darkness, then bent his head, quietly pinning his IA badge back to his rain-blurred shirt. The badge was officially suspended, but in his eyes it hadn't lost an ounce of weight. Tomorrow night, he knew there'd be blood. But tonight, at least, the truth no longer trembled hidden in the dark. After countless sleepless nights digging through every file, Malcolm knew one truth by heart. If he kept fighting in the dark, he would fall like all the others who'd tried to drag Dean Rourke into the light. This police department had buried more than enough files. Burying one more IA corpse wouldn't even raise an eyebrow. At dawn, Malcolm knocked on the door of a small cafe halfway down an old street, not far from IA headquarters. Naomi Ellis was already waiting, hair tied high, voice recorder on the table in place of any greeting. They sat face to face, steam from their coffees curling into the morning mist. No small talk. 3 hands on the table, IA, press, the public. One goal: drag Dean's name out of the shadows, rip Franklin Rourke Sr.'s roots out of his Legend of the Force disguise. Malcolm flipped open his laptop, turned the screen to Naomi. The stack of files on Dean sat there, a list of suppressed complaints, shuffled unit reassignments, and an audio file of Franklin Sr. issuing veiled threats. Enough to get him killed if hidden, enough to save him if thrown into the public floodlight. Naomi nodded, her voice curt but her eyes bright as a flashlight probing a sewer. I'll fire the first shot, a teaser clip, promise a public live hearing. You sure? Malcolm answered with a single word, sure. But he wasn't done. Malcolm cornered Dylan Mercer, the young officer who'd spent years looking but never speaking. He dragged Dylan into a hallway corner, pressed an old statement into his hands, stared him dead in the eye. Either you stand with me before the people, or you'll end up stacked with this rotten file, sooner or later. Dylan's hands trembled, but for the first time, he didn't look away. A small nod, but to Malcolm, it was worth more than an oath. Naomi moved with the speed of a bloodhound tasting fresh kill. That same afternoon, a teaser cut from the night Malcolm brandished his IA badge went live on every local news site, stamped with the line, "Sacramento police will hear the truth, what they buried for 20 years. Chief Tate had nowhere left to hide. Since that IA badge clip hit the web, his phone hadn't stopped. Reporters crowding the gate, black community leaders waving banners demanding a purge. Franklin Sr.'s hand still thrashed behind the scenes, lawyering up, threatening countersuits. But public outrage now shackled Chief Tate with a chain stronger than any political seatbelt. Stay silent to keep the seat. But silence would lose it overnight. By late afternoon, Tate called Malcolm up to his office, door shut, blinds drawn. His voice was no longer the pompous bark he used when disciplining others. He growled, palms slamming the desk. "I order you to stand down. Let me handle this internally. You leak it. You blow this department up." Malcolm stood straight, morning coffee still warm in his gut, eyes locked on Tate's. "Internally? It's rotted to the bone, Chief." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked out, leaving behind the helpless stare of a man once proud of running an untouchable system. Malcolm's footsteps hit each IA stair like they weren't steps to an office anymore, but a staircase leading him to the public hearing where there was no turning back. The hearing convened in Sacramento's largest community hall, rows packed tight, overhead lights blazing white, like surgical lamps over an abscess about to burst after 2 rotten decades. Naomi Ellis fronted a squadron of cameras and mics, hand glued to her recorder, eyes sweeping the room for anyone daring to jam the signal. Dylan Mercer stood shoulder to shoulder with Malcolm, shoulders rigid, fist clenched around his statement. To outsiders, he looked like just another young cop, but tonight he was a living shield. Anyone wanting to hit Malcolm would have to break him first. At the back, Franklin Rourke Sr. was absent, but the empty VIP chair said it all. He'd sent a squad of slick-suited lawyers, icy-faced, earbuds piping every word straight to him. In the corridors, a few shady types whispered threats to keep locals away. Pointless. Naomi's teaser had already packed the hall to a pulsing sea of angry breath and restless eyes. Malcolm stepped to the podium, mic steady in his grip. Live stream lights drilled into his face, countless unseen watchers waiting for him to speak. He didn't shout, didn't wave his hands like a politician. He just tapped the projector. Behind him, raw audio, IA timeline charts, photos of trembling witnesses clutching complaints, then vanishing. Each slide a slap across the face of the so-called family that protects justice. The rustle of the crowd died. Only Dylan's quick breathing remained, until he grabbed the mic, voice shaking. I saw Dean Rourke force people to drop charges. He threatened to finish me off if I opened my mouth. I was scared. I stayed silent, but I'm not scared anymore. His voice cracked and tears flicked from his eyes. Someone sobbed out loud. The hall froze for a heartbeat, then ignited when Franklin Sr.'s his phone threat boomed through the speakers. "Get rid of that damn IA bastard from me!" The lawyers below squirmed, whispered frantically, but it was futile. The live stream was the only judge now. Hashtags Rourke leaks and Justice Sacramento surged in view counts, news feeds sharing every second raw. Chief Tate rose to his feet, his deep blue suit creased at the shoulders, voice hoarse but sharp. The Sacramento Police Department hereby launches a full investigation into Dean Rourke and every link in this cover-up. The people deserve the truth. Applause exploded from the back rows up to the rafters. No one commanded it. It burst like a blown pressure valve. Naomi broke down. Camera locked on Malcolm's tear-brimmed eyes as he nodded slightly. Dylan gripped his shoulder from behind. Malcolm stepped down from the mic, each step on the wooden stage hollow but his chest lighter than than ever, like he'd just laid the final stone on the grave of the thing that once haunted him. Silence. He looked at Naomi, at Dylan, at the roaring sea of people now on their feet, clapping thunder into the rafters, and in that moment he knew he hadn't won because of ink on legal paper. He'd won because tonight the people no longer bowed to the rusted badge that thugs like Dean once used to threaten an entire city. The makeshift hearing room had been set up right in the main hall of the precinct, chairs lined up in tight rows, a central aisle slicing the murmuring crowd in half. Under harsh overhead lights, faces braced stiff with curiosity, anxiety, rage, and a flicker of hope. Every eye locked on Malcolm Shaw as he appeared at the head of the aisle. Black suit, tight tie, a face cold as steel forged through fire many times over. Dean Rourke sat to the left, Franklin Rourke Sr. next to him, fingers tapping lightly on his cane. Father and son wore matching ash-gray suits, but the eyes set them apart. Dean feigned calm, but sweat beaded at his temples. Franklin's lips curled. Sure that decades of backdoor strings could snap any file Malcolm dared to lay bare. On the raised dais, Chief Warren Tate presided, tapping his wooden gavel when the murmurs in the hall rose too high. His eyes lingered longest on Malcolm. Trust mingled with doubt, fear crackling underneath. Knowing the coming quake could sweep his own chair away, too. Naomi Ellis waited near the press row, a local news crew's camera locked to her shoulder, live stream feed shooting out to dozens of channels. Outside, hundreds more crowded around a big screen, waiting for something more than justice, a face reveal, to scrub away old bloodstains. Malcolm laid his case files on the stand, eyes for nothing but the big projector screen planted at center stage. He didn't waste words. One hand flipped up the first slide, the stop report, forged paperwork, doctored investigation forms. Each frame landed like a scalpel, carving open the hush orders, the cover-ups, the lies washed clean for show. Dean squirmed, and a dry cough made reporters flip pens to paper. When Malcolm flipped to the comparison of old disciplinary records, hard proof that the Rourkes buried civilian complaints more than once, Franklin still managed a mocking grin. But when the stop video played, all their tricks popped like soap bubbles meeting a blade. Dean's face in the night glowed on screen, pressed close to the car window, barking threats. The flash of patrol lights glaring across Malcolm's eyes. No wasted seconds. Dean's scoffing laugh echoing through the hall, then that final frame. Dean stepping back, rattled when the IA badge hit him square in the face. A ripple of whispers rose into an angry wave. Arrest him. How many years did he pocket dirty money? Who protected him? One man roared, "Where's our justice?" Chief Tate slammed the gavel again and again, face flushed, voice cracking as he barked for silence. But silence had died the instant the clip showed Dean bowing his head. Malcolm calmly paused the video, eyes boring into Dean without mercy. He asked one question, heavy enough to crush the air. "Do you have anything to defend yourself?" Dean Rourke's mouth fell open, throat working uselessly like a fish stranded on dry rock. His eyes darted wildly at the crowd, desperate for some hollow plea. Finding none, he turned his pleading stare to Franklin Rourke Sr., the biggest shadow that had saved him from dirty files for a decade straight. Franklin sprang up, cane striking the floor, voice still rumbling with that old iron. "Objection! This is a setup to destroy my family. That man's a traitor!" But the protest choked halfway when the hall doors burst open. Dylan Mercer appeared, shoulders trembling slightly but eyes unflinching for the first time. Dylan clutched a tiny USB, handing it straight to a supervising officer. When the recording played, every murmur vanished. Speakers blasted Dean's voice and a chorus of familiar laughs, scheming how to fake fines, split hush cash with bar owners, and silence anyone who dared talk. Dean's laugh, sharp and undeniable. "Those black monkeys? Beat 'em till they bow down." Heat roiled in the crowd like oil over fire. Some cursed, some bit their lips to dam tears. Naomi Ellis swung her camera, catching Dean's face as his shoulders collapsed, head nearly buried in his hands to hide from the lens. Franklin shrieked like a wounded beast. "This is fake. That traitorous dog was paid off. He lunged for Dylan's mic, but two security staff pinned the old man down like pressing a cracked throne into the dirt. Chief Warren Tate never flinched, hands steady as he lifted the gavel, pounding it to the worn wood. This disciplinary council rules to revoke Dean Rourke's badge. Franklin Rourke Sr. and all connected individuals will face prosecution. I'm forwarding the full case to the district attorney immediately. A scattered clap broke out, hesitant, then swelled into a wave smashing the rafters. Camera shutters snapped, pens scratched furiously, and outside, the live stream burst into tens of thousands of shares within minutes. Malcolm Shaw glanced at Dean one last time. No hate, no pity. Just an icy mirror slicing through the filth of power. He nodded once to Dylan, the man who'd played both sides but finally cut the last dirty cord binding Rourke's name to a throne. Naomi Ellis pushed in close, mic up to his lips. "Mr. Shaw, any words for the community?" Malcolm scanned the packed hall, the faces still burning hot, then spoke just loud enough to hit every ear. "Justice borrowed my name for one night to wake up. Whether it stays awake, that's up to all of you." After Chief Tate's gavel struck, the air seemed to settle, the rage momentarily soothed. But before Dean could even be led out, Franklin Rourke Sr. suddenly lurched up, cane smashing the tiled floor with a dry crack echoing through the hearing hall. Though age and cigarettes had shredded his voice, he forced it out loud enough to yank every eye back to him, the shadow of a retired kingmaker refusing to fade. Back hunched, breath rasping, Franklin locked his eyes on Malcolm, gaze hooking like a rusted fishhook. "What do you want, boy? My head? Want the whole Rourke name wiped off this city map? I'm ready to sit down, negotiate this like two men who know how street law works." His words dropped into the hall like a stone slab, muffling the crowd instantly. A few old-timers in uniform, hidden among the audience, lowered their eyes. They knew if Malcolm nodded, no more blood would spill, the scandal would be bartered away behind closed doors, and a legend would retreat into darkness, with at least a shred of dignity intact. Franklin's neck veins bulged blue as he growled like a cornered beast. "I'll hand over every black fund file, every dirty dollar the politicians pocketed. I'll let you be the hero, and I'll keep enough name to bury with this grave plot. Fair trade, Shaw." Malcolm didn't answer right away. He looked down at the IA badge resting in his palm, thumb brushing the faint scratch along the edge of the logo. The hall lights caught a cold glint off its metal face, a shield he'd guarded for years. Now the lone blade sharp enough to hack through the rotted power network standing before him. When he looked up, there was no anger in his eyes, no pity either. He saw Franklin as a statue cracked at its base, ready to crumble. "Old man, you're not afraid of prison. You're afraid of losing face. Me? I'm not afraid of losing face. I'm afraid of losing justice. There's no deal tonight, period." A rustle of whispers rose like ants bursting underground. Franklin froze, fingers clutching his cane, trembling violently. Then it slipped from his hand, clattering hard on the tile. The sturdy knees of a once legendary officer buckled under the weight of secrets long since rotted. He collapsed, knees crashing to the cold floor. Reporters' cameras fired off in rapid bursts, lenses feasting on every angle. The powerhouse myth that had been worshipped for decades now sat slumped like a beggar, mumbling words no one could make out anymore. A man nearby exhaled and muttered just loud enough for his neighbor, "It's over. The Rourke Dynasty is done." And that whisper spread faster than any hashtag. From the hall of the police headquarters, spilling out into Sacramento's streets, glowing awake under amber streetlights, Dean Rourke stood frozen, a drained ghost in the crowd's glare. His shoulders drooped, hands limp at the seams of a police uniform faded by years of dirty work, yet still flaunting a badge of law protector. When a supervising officer stepped up, Dean didn't shout, didn't resist, didn't utter a single denial. He only bowed his head and slowly unclipped the badge from his chest, the same badge he'd once brandished to grind people beneath his boot. The metal clinked onto the wooden table with a dry note. It bounced once, then lay still, tiny but heavy enough to crush decades of lies, brute power, and whitewashed crimes. Tonight, it was no longer Dean Rourke's shield, but a shattered tombstone for the Rourke family's inherited hold over the city. Chief Warren Tate drew a long breath, not bothering to hide the bead of sweat running down his cheek. He gave a faint nod. 2 security officers flanked Dean. Another clamped Franklin Rourke Sr.'s arm, dragging him out of the hearing hall with his head bowed in disgrace. The crowd parted, forming a narrow human corridor just wide enough for what was left of a once mighty clan to pass through, like a funeral procession humming with quiet fury. Each step Dean shuffled forward, hundreds of eyes stabbed into his back like cold knives, ripping away the arrogance that had crushed this community for far too long. Naomi Ellis tracked him tightly, camera inches from Dean's face. The lens caught every twitch of muscle, his dry lips shaping half-formed excuses that died before they left his throat. No one left to cover for him now, no backroom code to keep him afloat. His borrowed uniform authority lay bare for millions watching online. Malcolm Shaw did not follow them out. He stayed rooted behind the hearing stand, gripping his IA badge. At once a talisman and the blade he knew would have to cut deeper still. A slow exhale slipped past his lips, carrying away the invisible tumor that had pressed on him through years lost among rotting files. In his mind, faces yet to be exposed flashed by, unspent black funds, falsified reports still buried in locked drawers. All flickered past like a tape rewinding. A young reporter pushed through the crowd, hands trembling as he raised a mic. "Mr. Shaw, will you stop here?" Malcolm tilted his head, eyes calm as glass. He smiled faintly, just enough for the mic to catch it. "I'm only getting started." Outside the hall, phones lit up like falling stars over Sacramento. Scattered applause rose, rolled into a roar. Cardboard signs reading "No More Rock" waved high. The hashtag Justice Awake ticked upward by the second, spreading from hand to hand like a fire, just now catching in a city that thought it had dozed off for good. Tonight, Sacramento buried a rotten badge empire and flung open the door for those still willing to stare justice in the face without hiding behind power. Right after the earth-shaking hearing, Chief Warren Tate called an emergency meeting, pulling in the entire command board, key department heads, and the internal affairs delegation led by Malcolm Shaw. The air in the conference room reeked of stale coffee, freshly printed documents still smelled of damp ink, and the weight of unspoken fear pressed on every shoulder like a rope tied to a boulder. Scattered across the scratched wooden table were the files IA had cracked open overnight. A list of officers under Dean Rourke who'd been accused of beatings and evidence tampering, but walked free thanks to dubious sign-offs. Diagrams of patrol teams taking turns extorting bar owners, hush money for brothels disguised as clubs. Every rotten vein branching out like an underground root network under the city's fake calm. Chief Tate sat at the head, back hunched forward, a fountain pen clenched between thumb and forefinger. His face, after a sleepless night, looked a decade older, eye bags sunken, gray, but the spark in his stare said he knew exactly what signing today meant. Severing the shadow network that once shielded him, dragging down half the deputy brass who'd hidden behind him for years. But if he didn't sign, Sacramento would burn his chair alive. Malcolm Shaw wasted no words. He quietly slid one more folder in front of Tate, a blueprint for an independent oversight body, airtight whistleblower protection, and tools to audit any patrol unit without needing a stamp from anyone, not even the chief. A clean cut, leaving no room to slip back into the dark. One gray-haired deputy cleared his throat, trying for a steady tone. "Sir, if we go this hard, the ranks will panic. Discipline will crumble." Chief Tate cut him off, voice raspy but sharp as cold steel. "How many parasites did that discipline breed? Can you answer that?" Silence coiled tight, then snapped when the pen touched paper. Each stroke showed a faint tremor in Tate's wrist, but no one dared breathe too loudly. Orders to revoke the badges of every leftover name in Rourke's crew hit the pile. New assignments to break up patrol units prone to corruption got stamped on the spot. A sealed list of files for IA to probe next, piece by piece, route by route. No cameras, no reporters, no grand promises, just fresh ink, dry throats, and people choking out the old power web to keep their own political skins alive, and to salvage a thin hope for the word police. When it ended, Malcolm tucked the fresh stack of classified plans into his inner jacket pocket. He didn't say goodbye, just slipped out the wooden door. In his mind, tonight wasn't closure. It was the starter gun for the next wave of sleepless nights, bigger, deeper, and only the truly clean would have the spine to keep up. News that Chief Warren Tate had officially signed the purge order leaked to the press just as dawn mist clung to City Hall's roof. Major outlets tripped over each other for headlines. Storm sweeps Sacramento PD's dirty legacy clean. A bit dramatic, but enough to feed a city's pent-up hunger for a win. Naomi Ellis didn't miss a beat. She cut a long-form exposé, stitching together clips from the night Malcolm tore Dean down, the public hearing, and closing with a title like a final slap, Badges Worn to Cast Shadows. In the closing scene, Naomi interviewed rookie cadets, young faces, clear eyes, hands not yet dipped in old swamp water. One probationary investigator, voice trembling but gaze steady into the camera. We know people lost trust a long time ago, but if no one trusts again, who's left to stand and protect this city? Inside the precinct, training blocks restarted like the early days when everything was still clean. Malcolm and IA pushed through a tighter cross-check protocol. Every patrol shift must wear body cams, all footage is stored online, and citizens are free to request clips if they feel suspicious. A small safeguard, but enough to rip holes in the darkness that once cloaked these backstreets. Chief Tate, hollowed out from back-to-back closed-door meetings, stayed late, night after night, scanning the new investigation lists. Each time an unfamiliar name cropped up, he'd glance at Malcolm and rasp out, still firm, "If someone tries to bend the rules again, you and I will drag them back into the light ourselves." Down in the precinct basement, IA's newly upgraded office glowed white all night. Brand new servers humming, logs backed up, young investigators hunched over flickering screens, tracing the last hidden threads left from the Rourke case. The clatter of keystrokes drummed like nails pounding shut the coffin of old tricks. On Malcolm's desk, the IA badge still lay inside a dark wooden box, beside a thick folder. He didn't pin it back on his shirt pocket just yet, because for Malcolm, authority had never sat in shiny metal. It lived in the guts to keep that metal clean. Sacramento that morning hadn't turned spotless overnight, but at least, from the ashes the Rourkes left behind, new roots were staking their claim. And anyone who'd witnessed the night that gold badge flashed knew deep down this reform wind, this time, wouldn't be easy to kill again. After the hearing, Naomi Ellis barely knew where night ended and morning began. 3 straight nights she curled up in her makeshift newsroom, a cheap, rented room, its battered desk littered with ink-smeared drafts, loose voice recorders, mismatched USB sticks stacked like fragile evidence towers. She knew one sloppy link in the same cover-up machine she'd cracked open would pounce, twisting her truth into a weapon against her. By day, Naomi drove her beat-up car from the north end to grim old blocks along the city beltway, revisiting each face that dared speak out. The single mother who nearly lost her car to Dean's crooked tickets. The courier boy who got his arm broken for asking questions. Dylan Mercer, now looking straight into the lens without flinching. Naomi was more meticulous than any lawyer, recording, getting signatures, calming them with the only promise she could truly keep. "I'll protect you with the truth and my name." One rainy night, the corrugated iron roof of her workroom rattled like a war drum. Naomi curled up in her swivel chair, fingers typing out each word of the headline. The dirty badge unmasked, the Rourke Dynasty and Sacramento's shatter. Below it sprawled a manuscript so long her laptop screen scrolled endlessly. She slashed, rewrote, and bit her pen like a surgeon sharpening a blade before cutting out a tumor. Each line had to stab right where it hurt. The hearts of those who'd sat smugly on 2 decades of silenced voices. One mistake, and they'd drag her to court, gag her with twisted laws. Her phone buzzed at 3 a.m. Malcolm's voice rasped through the line. "Don't leave a loophole, Naomi. One slip, they'll erase everything we've built. Naomi wedged the phone between her shoulder and ear, still hammering the keys. Trust me, this piece will punch straight through that old shield they've waved to scare this city for years. Outside, the rain eased up. Inside, the desk lamp cast a warm halo over a fortress of paper. Naomi straightened her back, eyes locked on the screen, hand trembling on the mouse. The final version was tight as a locked gear. No back door left for spin buttons. She stared at the publish button like a detonator. One click and Sacramento would tremble again, but this time no one could order her to shut up. Naomi inhaled, exhaled, and hit post. In that moment, she saw herself clearly. Not a click-hungry stringer anymore, but the torchbearer, shining a light into a sewer everyone else tiptoed around for decades. She released the exposé on a Monday morning, the city's laziest hour, when big outlets fumbled through their inboxes and office workers needed something scalding with their coffee. Her headline was brutally short, a blade gliding at the throat of secrecy. Dirty badge, the truth behind the Rourke family. Inside, no poetic filler, no staged tears, just cold cuts. Dean Rourke's stop-and-harass timeline, complaints forcibly vanished. Franklin Sr.'s hissed phone order, shut that IA bastard up. Each fact is pinned down with raw files, untouched clips. Naomi let the truth slap readers in the face. No extra bitterness needed. The effect caught like wildfire on gasoline. 4 hours post-publishing, her piece topped trending in the social issues section. Naomi leaks blanketed social feeds. Major outlets, once dismissive of her blog, scrambled to echo her, citing Naomi as their prime source. Even the local TV station cut regular programming for an emergency anchor. Naomi Ellis' report rocks Sacramento PD to its core. Inside her shabby newsroom, Naomi watched her view counter tick up by the second. DMs flooded in, interview invites from CNN, plus a threatening email from the Rourke family lawyers barking defamation. She typed back one line, "You can't sue the truth." She laughed under her breath. For the first time, she understood that a journalist's victory wasn't a fat paycheck or a shiny award. It was watching the same thugs who once silenced her people squint at her paragraphs and realize they couldn't gag the world anymore. A week later, the California Investigative Press Guild handed her the Truth Defender Award, a trophy she'd dreamed of for a decade but never thought she'd earn by dragging blood and secrets into daylight. At the ceremony, Naomi wore a plain white blouse, hair tied high, her hands light on the certificate, but her voice rock silent as she read a passage from her bombshell report. The hall of hundreds went dead silent, except for the scratch of pens on notepads. Cameras zoomed in on her pale, sleepless face. She dipped her head once, then lifted her gaze straight into the live feed. "This won't be my last story. I'm not going anywhere. As long as someone hides behind a badge to muzzle this city, I'll keep writing." That night, Sacramento sank into a chilly fog. But those who'd kept quiet all their lives finally knew, somewhere out there, a pen would always stand ready to knock on truth's door, no matter who tried to smother it with dirty power. After the night Rourke fell, Malcolm Shaw didn't rush to vacate the IA chief's chair. He stayed for another 3 months, an anchor holding back any hands still lurking to tie up loose ends in half-finished case files. Every morning, walking down the IA hallway, Malcolm saw all kinds of eyes, some fearful, some respectful, and plenty glaring with quiet hatred. He knew that look well, the look of someone who once bowed to the gold badge, now just waiting for the day it dropped from his chest so they could come collect old debts. Old corruption files were dug up one by one. Names, shady expenses, investigation orders buried under Dean Rourke's reign, all crawled into daylight like bugs fleeing a broken nest. Every summons Malcolm signed smelled of fresh ink. His hand never once trembled. He didn't care whose cousin got called in or what council seat they held outside City Hall. The city council, bitter over IA messing up their neat web of interests, still had to admit, in all these years, no internal affairs unit had stripped masks off the force so fast and clean as IA under Malcolm Shaw. One night, while he was reviewing an investigation chart, a promotion letter arrived discreetly on his desk. They wanted him to take the deputy chief inspector's seat for the entire city. Malcolm didn't answer right away. The night before signing, he walked alone into the records vault. Yellow light fell over rows of dented steel cabinets, his fingers brushing over file folders still clipped shut, the pages inside already browned at the edges. He knew a higher seat meant more enemies, but staying too long in one place scared him even more. He'd rot into a hollow door frame, just like the Rourke crew who collapsed thinking they were ironclad. The next morning, as IA's lights flicked on, Malcolm put on a black suit, buttoned it neatly, and sealed his old badge inside a dark wooden box. He locked the box in the safe and handed the code to the young assistant of the new IA team. No backward glance, no shoulder clap goodbye. Outside, rows of desks were already filling with fresh investigator faces. They lugged stacks of files, eyes glued to laptops, drafting their first reports without anyone hovering over them line by line. Malcolm stood at the doorway, gave a single nod, then strode down the stone steps, stepping out with a faint smile, leaving behind him a new generation, winding up their own watch springs. The final hearing before Malcolm Shaw took his new seat wasn't broadcast live, but not a single seat in the city hall was empty. The hallway outside was packed tight, people leaning over each other's shoulders just to hear him speak one last time as IA's old gatekeeper. On a plain wooden podium, no fixed mic, no cue cards, Malcolm stood straight, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes landing one by one on familiar faces he had trusted, or had once been forced to suspect. He saw Naomi Ellis perched on the edge, camera balanced on her shoulder, face tense like a trigger waiting to snap. He caught Dylan Mercer in an ill-fitting borrowed suit, planted dead center of the front row, a silent thank you for pulling him out of Dean Rourke's mud to stand here today. Malcolm lingered longest on the rookie IA crew pressed along the wall, still awkward, shoulders twitchy, shoe tips not yet polished like the old guards, but their eyes burned bright enough to blind. He knew one sloppy word from him today could choke that fragile hope, or fling it wide open, the same way one night he'd raised his badge in a dark street to rip the filthy mask off power. He cleared his throat. His voice dropped low, steady as a hammer striking an old coffin lid. That night, they pulled me over because my skin was darker than the uniform they wore. They thought their gun hand outranked my rights. But I stood my ground, and the badge I held up that night wasn't just to save me. It was to open the door for anyone else still stopped out of fear. He paused, just long enough for the air between hundreds of people to settle like dust hanging before it drops. They stopped my car once. They opened the door to reform forever. No applause came instantly. The room froze for a heartbeat. Then the first clap broke out, lone but sharp. The second, the third, then a swell like surf pounding ashore, crashing up to the high dome and back into everyone's chest. Some stood and clapped until their palms burned red, as if crushing years of rage once silenced under hollow badges. Malcolm dipped his head slightly, stepped down from the podium, never looking back. As he reached the top step, out to the foyer, a tiny hand tugged his suit jacket. A little boy in a faded t-shirt held up a stiff board scribbled with a marker, "Future IA Boss." Malcolm took the board, nodded slowly, and gently ruffled the boy's rough hair. In that moment, Naomi swung her camera, catching the whole angle, a frame for the evening news, standing in for any promise of an IA that would never bow again. That morning in Sacramento, the streets didn't magically clean up and the sun didn't blaze any brighter, but at least people had learned a new habit: to look straight at the badge on a patrolman's chest and finally ask the question they never dared to before: who's holding it? This story isn't just a battle between a corrupt cop and a stubborn IA chief. It's proof that justice survives because people still believe in it. Malcolm didn't need grand speeches. He let the evidence speak for itself and raised his IA badge exactly when it mattered most. Naomi had nothing but an old recorder, but she turned it into a blade that sliced through the reputation armor of those who sheltered the corrupt. Speaks for himself. Dean Rourke forgot that real power power doesn't live in barked orders. It lives where justice always finds a way to stand up on its own feet. Justice doesn't need perfect heroes, just ordinary people brave enough to speak up and wield a camera, a pen, or the internet when it counts. If this story moves you, make it a lesson and a reason to keep believing that justice never truly dies. And if you're still listening, I'll keep telling. Naomi will keep writing. Malcolm will keep raising that gold badge. You've been underestimated in a meeting because your title wasn't as long as someone else's. But more important than any of that, have you quietly proved who you really are? Malcolm didn't bicker with Dean. He let the camera roll, let the public decide, and raised his IA badge only when it mattered most. He didn't win by talking big, he won by preparing his files, his evidence, and letting the truth speak for itself. And Naomi, she wasn't the first journalist to uncover the truth, but she was the first to set fear aside and turn a pile of files into a double-edged blade, cutting off the family reputation armor of the protectors. Because she believed, alone, she might lose, but if she gave people the truth, they wouldn't let her fall. So, where do you stand in this story? Who are you? Are you Malcolm, the one who dares to raise the badge of justice when everyone else trembles? Are you Naomi, sharpening your pen to a razor's edge? Or are you Dylan, who once stayed silent, but one day stepped up before a crowd to say, I used to be afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. We all tremble sometimes, but justice doesn't need flawless people. Justice needs ordinary people brave enough to speak up when it counts. And the social media, the phone, the camera you hold every day, that's your gold badge too. It's not just for random videos. It's to capture the moment evil shows its face, so no one can silence you again. Remember this, in any state, any city, if there's still a rusty badge blinding the people, there will also be a pen, a camera, a person like you, like me, ready to expose it. Have you ever been misjudged because someone didn't bother to understand you? Have you been brushed aside, shut out of a room, only to quietly prove you were 10 times better than the label they stuck on you? If this story stings a bit, if it digs up memories of when you were underestimated, let it be a lesson, not just for you, but for the person next to you too. Share this story. Share this video. Don't let it be just another clip you scroll past. Let it be the reason someone out there in despair remembers that justice has never died. And if you want more stories like this, raw truths, no sugarcoating for the abusers, don't forget to subscribe. Because as long as one person listens, I'll keep telling, Naomi will keep writing, and Malcolm will keep raising that gold badge. Remember, justice doesn't exist on its own. It lives inside people like you.